when Mr. Marcus snags a 200-acre plot of wilderness for a steal. His dreams of turning it into a glamping paradise seem too good to be true. But as strange discoveries pile up, including an abandoned mine and a deserted logging camp, things take a sinister turn. Mysterious scratch marks, locked iron doors, and eerie noises begin to hint at something far darker lurking beneath the land. When a group of daring spelunkers agrees to explore the forgotten mine, what they uncover could cost them more than just their curiosity. Something ancient and dangerous is waking up. Would you dare enter? Curse of the Silver Het Mine by Positive Tennis 6626. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. Part 1. Congratulations, Mr. Marcus, on your new property, the realtor said as she shook my hand, and the sun was setting in the west. Well, thank you, but as I already told you, it's just Mark, I replied. Well, Mark, I still congratulate you on your land purchase. What do you plan on doing with all 200 acres? The realtor asked as she hung the sold sign underneath the for sale sign. Well, build a bunch of luxurious rustic cabins and rent them out as Airbnb for glamping. People eat that crap up. As the realtor left, I looked into the woods and took in a big, deep breath of fresh mountain air. Tomorrow, I said aloud, though no one was around to hear me. Tomorrow I'll go into town, get some supplies, and do a proper survey of the land. Not just that walk around the realtor gave me. Yeah, tomorrow. But right now, I want a rum and coke. I walked back to my small camper and fired up the generator. The lights inside flickered on in a warm glow, and I celebrated my new business venture. It was hard not to. I got this land for a steal. It was way below market value, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say I celebrated way too hard. Well, I'm not going to bore you with all the details over the next few months, but the proper paperwork was filed, building permit acquired, and a well was dug. The only real snag was getting the zoning changed. It was zoned for commercial logging, and before that for mining. It struck me as odd. Trying to get it zoned for residential use was about as easy as giving an octopus a manicure. I had to pay special fees and fill out mounds of paperwork, all while the area where I wanted to build was cleared of trees and vegetation. The building material for 3 homes just laid around, taking up space, and work crews stood around all day, costing me money. I finally got in front of the zoning board and pleaded my case, explaining how it would bring tourists into the town and local businesses would get a boost in sales. I was denied a zoning change. From there it was playing the small-town politics game. Greasing some pockets, a very expensive bottle of whiskey showed up on the mayor's desk. The president of the zoning board was suddenly able to afford that new pickup truck he wanted. You get the idea. The town was in an uproar when it got approved. Things started going missing at the construction site and heavy equipment was damaged. The chief of police got a new pool, and then all the issues stopped. First house was completed, except for the solar panels that needed to be installed. The walls were going up on the second house, and the concrete foundation was being poured for the third. I had a survey crew out looking for a new location. It was early in the morning. I poured a cup of hot, fresh coffee into my travel mug and was just about to go and inspect the work sites. I knew nothing about construction. I just wanted to make sure the crews weren't slacking off. Then there was a knock on my trailer door. "Hey boss, you in there?" a voice said. I opened up the door to see Sam, survey foreman, at the door. "What do you want, Sam?" I asked, with just a little irritation in my voice. "Boss, we found something you should probably see," Sam said. I stepped out of my trailer and was following Sam. He was going on about something, but I just tuned him out while we walked, and I took sips of coffee from my travel mug. I let the warm, caffeinated drink work its magic on me, and we walked for a while through the woods till we came to the edge of a cliff, looking down into a small valley. Sam started back up. "See, boss, me and the boys were out looking for a good spot to put the new houses you want up. We thought this would have a nice view of the land, and then we spotted that down there." I looked where Sam was pointing, and to my shock, there was what appeared to be a big, single-story log cabin that looked almost like a rectangle. Behind it were 4 smaller rectangular cabins spaced evenly apart from each other and almost equidistant from the main cabin in the middle. Each of the smaller cabins had what seemed to be a small wooden shed off to the left and another small shed behind them. Off to the left and set further back was a 2-story cabin. To the right, about 300 yards away, was a giant metal tower with exposed beams and support legs with metal lattice working all throughout, about 100 feet high, with 2 giant wheels that adorn the top with cables running to a smaller building behind it. "This is all on my land?" I asked. Sam replied with, "Yes, it barely is, but technically yes. You might have some issues with the mine tunnels." "What?" I stammered. "That's a mine?" The realtor never mentioned a mine on the property. She said this land was used for logging, and that there is a logging camp, though I never found it. "I asked some of the guys in the crew about that," replied Sam. "My dad was a miner. I remember visiting him at work and seeing the same hulking tower. Now, Steve, the new guy on my team, was a logger and explained that the big log cabin in the middle was the cook shanty where everyone ate. The buildings behind them were the bunkhouses where everyone slept. Finally, the little sheds behind the bunk rooms were most likely the outhouses. My best guess is that the mine came first and then the logging camp," Sam said. I shook my head and replied, "Makes no sense to me. Let's go down there for a better look." We made our way down to the logging camp. Well, this is kind of cool. Never done any exploring like this before, I thought to myself. As we walked through the camp and up to the big tower, ideas were racing through my head. Oh man, I could turn this into a hunting lodge, or market the bunk rooms as eco-friendly lodging. Hippies love that crap. I'm gonna be so freaking rich. "Hey boss, what do you make of this?" I looked at where Sam was pointing. There were small scratch marks all along the tower. They weren't deep marks that marred the metal, but surface scratches as if someone was crawling around. "Bears? Maybe a mountain lion?" I surmised. "Yeah, maybe, but the marks go up 50 feet. What would a mountain lion been doing up there? More importantly, how would it get up there to begin with?" Sam asked. A plaque next to the elevator read, "Silverhead Mine." "Hey, this used to be a silver mine," I said out loud. The elevator appeared to be in decent shape from what I could see. The hole leading down into the mine had 2 massive sliding iron doors on tracks covering it. "Hey boss, you want me to have the guys open it up?" Sam asked as he walked to one side and gripped the handles on the door. No, let's wait to do that. If the people before us sealed it with the doors, they must have had a good reason. Let's go check out the other building," I replied. The inside of the bunk room seemed to be in rough shape, with mold on the wood, and the bunk bed frames rusted out. The cook shanty had a lock on the door, but after giving it one good whack with a crowbar, the old lock fell right on. The inside of the cook shanty was in immaculate condition. Inside was a large open room with 3 tables and bench seating, all made out of solid oak. The walls had a few deep scratches on them, as if some sort of animal had gotten in. 2 wooden doors led to the back, where the kitchen had cast iron ovens and stoves, all wood burning. I was amazed to discover there was no rust and no ash. There wasn't even a squeak when I opened the oven door. Shelves that lined the backside of the kitchen were where the dry goods would have been stored. The 2-story cabin turned out to be the mine boss's office and lounge. The first floor had a beautiful stone fireplace, a smooth hand-carved desk, a mounted deer head hung above the fireplace, and a painted portrait hung behind the desk. It portrayed a family of 3, the father in a top hat, suit, and a cloak, his wife on his left side wearing a bright yellow dress, and an older daughter in the middle wearing a light green dress. Behind them, on top of a hill, sat a 3-story Victorian manor house. On the bottom of the painting, a small bronze plaque was mounted to the frame which read, "The Ravenswood Family." The upstairs of the cabin had a small bar and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Hey Sam, does this place have power?" I asked. "Well boss, I've seen junction boxes outside all the structures, but don't know if it's hooked up to the grid," Sam replied from the first floor of the cabin. I pulled the chain on the light, but nothing happened. Like an idiot, I pulled the chain a few more times, as if I was expecting something to happen. I walked down the wooden staircase to the first floor and spotted Sam looking at something next to the door. "What are you looking at, Sam?" I asked. "The telephone's an old one. It even says Bell Telephone Company on the side of it," Sam said. And there were in fact two telephones. One was black and the other was a dull yellow with black spots where the paint had chipped away from it. I reached for the yellow phone and picked it up. Nothing. I put the phone back on the receiver and tried the black phone. To my surprise, I got an old-fashioned dial tone, as if the phone was still hooked up to the phone line. I looked at Sam and said, "Well, let me try to call my cell phone." The phone had a rotary wheel just like my grandparents had had. It took me a minute to remember how to dial out. The line rang once, and I got my cell phone's voicemail. I was lucky to get one bar of service out here. Anytime I had to make a phone call for any reason, I had to drive into town where I could get a good signal. Maybe an underground phone line, I thought to myself. Well, the phone works, which is kind of weird, but hey, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, I said. Sam and I left the cabin and made our way over to the metal shack that held the mine elevator system. Big thick cables on massive steel drums took up most of the room. A big green engine that said Cummins on the side took up the remaining space. "Well, boss, there's your power. Big-ass generator. Shoot, that thing looks like it's from the 70s. Wonder if it even runs," Sam said to me. "Well, this is a lot to take in, Sam. I'm going to walk around the property. Why don't you and your boys get back to work?" "Hey, look, I appreciate you letting me know about all this," I said to him. And Sam replied, "Yeah, sure thing, boss." I spent the rest of the day exploring the buildings and the mine elevator. I looked at the two massive iron doors covering the mine with a heavy-duty lock and chain wrapped around the handles. Both the lock and chain were rusted to hell and back. There was about a 3-inch gap between the doors, but it looked like the doors could be opened about 6 or 7 inches before the chain would be good and tight. I gave the door a tug, but it wouldn't budge. Rusted shut. I have to get some PB Blaster and some WD-40 to unstick that later, I thought. I spent the rest of the day looking around and making a list of everything I'd need to get this place back in shape. The next day, when the electrician showed up to install the solar panels, I had him look at the logging camp instead. After testing the connection, junction boxes and fuse boxes on all the buildings in the logging camp, he said, "Well, it's all hooked up and working properly. It's older wiring, but most of it's underground, so the risk of a fire due to a short circuit's minimal. It should work once the generator's turned on. That looks to be in great shape. I don't know about all the liquids inside, oil, coolant, diesel, fuel, and so on. If they've been sitting there a while, your liquids could be solids by now. I got a buddy of mine who does diesel engines. Why don't you give him a call?" Well, I did call, and he came out right away. He replaced all the fluids, and we fired up the generator. It belched black smoke twice, and then growled to life. I took a step outside and saw the lights come on. The mine elevator tower's sodium floodlights came on and cast everything in eerie orange-yellow shadows. The light stretched all the way up to the tree line of the forest. A warm glow came from the cabin windows. In the cook shanty, a light came from under the main double doors. The diesel mechanic explained to me that there's enough fuel in the internal tank for about 72 hours under a workload. The mechanic then showed me how to operate the generator and what all the gauges and buttons do. As the sun set, I took a deep breath of the north woods air while the sound of the generator hummed from inside the metal elevator shack. I walked back to shut down the generator and walked out of the elevator shack towards my truck. I was about 50 feet away from the mine when I heard a loud bang. I spun around and looked in the direction of the mine and heard another loud bang, followed by the sounds of chains bouncing off iron. The sun was below the tree line, but not quite to the horizon. It almost looked like something had slammed against the doors of the mine shaft. I saw what looked like rust shaking loose and floating into the air like an orange-colored dust storm. I walked up to the edge of the doors, right in the middle, and shone my cell phone's flashlight into the gap between the doors. I held the phone down low, just above the doors. walls. I saw a quick flash of white move across the gap. The movement startled me, and I jumped back, dropping my phone. Luckily, it didn't fall through the gap in the doors, but instead bounced off the iron door with a thud and landed on the gravel next to it. When I bent down to pick up my phone, I heard a soft hissing of a rattle emanating from the mine. I quickly grabbed my phone and walked away while mumbling to myself, "Well, that has to be a bat. A really, really big-ass bat to move a door like that. And a dumb bat to hit the door. Yeah, just a bat. What else could it be? Nothing, that's what. God, I need a drink. Time to hit the bar." Then got in my truck and drove towards downtown. Monday morning came around and I awoke to the sounds of birds chirping and squirrels playing in the forest. What I didn't hear was the sound of construction workers working and heavy machinery moving. I quickly threw on pants and a t-shirt. My head was still pounding from the weekend's drinking bender, and I had to concentrate more than I would like to admit from keeping what was left in my stomach from coming up. I opened up the door to my trailer and saw that no one was around all the equipment and building material. There were just no people. I checked my phone. No calls, but then again no service as well. I drove into town and stopped at a small mom-and-pop diner for breakfast. As soon as I got into town and had cell phone service, the phone exploded with texts and missed calls. There were over 24 of them. A lot of the missed calls were from the construction men saying my checks had bounced. I checked my account and was shocked to see that almost all my money was gone. My crypto investment went belly up over the weekend, leaving me with hardly any money. All construction on the house had come to a stop. Oh, stupid, stupid, I thought. Why did I have the electrician look at that damn logging camp instead of installing the solar panels? I could have at least gotten people to stay here. No panels means no power. No power means no well pump. Without a well pump, I won't have toilets or showers. Stupid, stupid. I thought all these things while banging my head against the steering wheel of my truck. I spent the next 3 days, and what little money I had, drinking my problems away at the local bar. Corgie's McShorty's Irish Pub. Why is there a Corgi-themed Irish pub way up in the North Woods? Who knows? I was sipping on my second glass of whiskey. The amber liquid was doing its best to help me forget my woes. I overheard a group of people talking and laughing. They were on their way out of the pub when I heard one of them say, "Well, we better turn in if we want to get to the cave early tomorrow." I downed the remainder of my drink and ran after the group. I caught them in the parking lot. "Hey, wait, hold up. You guys said something about cave exploring?" I asked. In front of me was a group of 5 in about their mid-20s. A woman stepped towards me. She was about 5'9", athletic build, with the words CrossFit running down the length of her yoga pants. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and very perky assets. She stuck out her hand and said, "Hey, I'm Samantha, and this ball of sunshine next to me is Jessica." Jessica was about the same height as Samantha. She wore baggy jeans and an oversized black hoodie. Her jet black hair hung just past her shoulders. She had the most intense green eyes, and there was a look of suspicion on her face when I approached. It was obvious that Jessica had stepped in to stop Samantha from making dumb decisions more than once. Samantha continued. "Tall guy in the back's Eric B. We call him Burns." Burns was in fact tall, over 6 feet. He just got out of the army only 7 months previous. He was built like a house, but since his time out, you could just start to see a small amount of fat forming over his physique. Samantha finally finished with, "And those 2 lovebirds in the back are Josh and Dakota." Josh was an average person with very few defining features, the kind of person who can walk into a room and just hide in plain sight. Dakota was just a head smaller than the rest, with long blonde hair. Her clothes were worn out, and the faded colors gave off the sense of someone whose family didn't come from money. "And yes, we are cave explorers," Samantha said with a matter-of-fact tone. "Spelunking. It's called spelunking," Burns said from the back. "Oh, right, yeah. Thank you, Burns. Yes, we're amateur spelunkers. Why do you ask?" replied Samantha. "I have a cave on my property." Well, it's a mine. A Silverhead mine. The mine shaft is closed, but I'm about to open up tours. Well, I'd love to have someone who knows what they're doing have a peek down there first, I explained. Everyone in the group looked excited, except for Jessica, who looked skeptical. How much? Samantha asked. Oh, crap, I thought. They want to get paid for this, don't they? Well, there goes your free explorers. I was about to open my mouth with a response when Samantha said again, How much does it cost to go into the mine? It's around $300 just to get a climbing permit to explore the caves around the national park. Oh, $200, I blurted out without thinking about it. Okay, sold, Samantha said, and continued with, Well, we're exploring some caves today, and we're back in 2 weeks. Can we do half now and half later? Absolutely, I said with a bit too much enthusiasm. The group started reaching into their pockets and purses for the cash. All but Jessica and Dakota, that is. Jessica just crossed her arms with a serious look on her face, and Dakota just kind of fidgeted with a look of sadness. Dakota then whispered something into Josh's ear. Jessica spoke out. Okay, everyone, can we all just chill out for 1 minute? We don't know this person, and you guys are ready just to hand him money. Look, we need your name and an address. Just how safe is this mine? My name's Mark. I can write down the address, and you're more than welcome to check out the mine before you leave this weekend. There's an elevator to get down. Now, to be honest with everyone, I don't know if it works. We can always rappel down the shaft. I used to rock climb, so I have the rope for it. I'll be going with you, of course, and if it makes you feel better, we can do half of the payment now and half later. Satisfied with this answer, even Jessica couldn't hold back a smile. Well, these kids love action and adventure, not to mention they'd be the first to explore the mine in who knows how many years. Everyone gave me $100. I gave them the address, shook everyone's hand, and happily walked back into the pub. Part 2. When I sat down at the bar, I noticed my glass was full. I was about to tell the bartender I didn't order a drink when the man next to me smoked. Did I hear correctly that you're reopening the Silverhead mine? Yes, I am, I said, very proud of the fact that I was. You know that mine is cursed, the man said. I blew air out of my nostrils and replied with, There are no such thing as curses. The man slammed his drink down on the bar in anger and frustration. Any mining worth their salt in this area knows the story of the Silverhead mine. But you're not from around here, are you? Before I could even begin to reply to this man sitting next to me, he began the story. All started back in 1869. I chuckled in my own head and thought, 69, nice. A man by the name of George Ravenswood started that mine. The mine went down deep till it struck silver. Things were good for a few years. Silver was flowing out of that mine like water from a tap. Now George, his wife, and his only daughter Melanie were very rich, and so was the town. Yeah, life was good for everyone. One day the miners were digging out a huge deposit of silver, the biggest one they found yet. They dug this huge cavern in the shape of a dome, about 6 football fields long, and about 4 football fields high at the biggest points. Well, there was a cave-in. Fortunately, everyone got out alive, but the size of the cave-in caused the surface above to sink into the ground. Shortly after that, a Native American chief and the tribe's shaman approached George, told him that the ground collapsed due to the fact that the mine was the site of that tribe's burial grounds. They asked George to stop digging in that area and leave their ancestors' bones to rest. But Henry, in his greed, refused to stop digging, so there was a lot more silver to dig in that spot. Well, the shaman cursed the mine and the Ravenwood family. He placed the curse of the Wirewalks. The Native Americans believed that the Wirewalks were demons from the afterlife, said to suck the soul out of any man, woman, or child at night, and only the spirit of the sun god could stop them. George just laughed at all this. The collapse caused a delay and he lost profits. As a result, he ordered the mine to be open 24 hours a day. As the day shift crew started to work, a powerful earthquake struck and trapped 18 miners in the cavern they were clearing out. The rest of the day crew did their best to rescue the trapped man. When the sun dipped below the horizon, a shrieking sound could be heard coming from the area of the trapped miners, followed by the sound of men calling out for help, in pain and terror. And then, suddenly, the cries stopped. It took the rescue party almost another 12 hours to reach the trapped miners. All that was found were the shriveled-up, dry husks of the men. Their dark skin stretched tight over the bones, with a look of anguish on each one of their faces. The bodies were brought up to the surface for the town doctor to look at. Well, the bodies weighed no more than just a few pounds. When the first body was cut open for an exam, they found all the organs, blood, and even the bone marrow was gone, leaving only the hollow bones on the inside. George gave the men 1 hour to grieve, then sent them back into the mine to dig. While the sun was up, all was peaceful in the mine, and work was normal. When the sun was setting, the men came up and the night shift went down. And that's when everything changed. 28 men went down into the Silverhead mine, but only 4 made it back to the elevator and rode it up to the surface. There they spent the night cowering in fear as the wire walks crawled all over the elevator tower, trying to get at the men. When dawn was approaching, the wire walks crawled back into the cave. It wasn't until the sun was up in the sky that the men left the safety of the elevator and ran into town to alert everyone. The wire walks were described to the town folks as the lower half of a praying mantis and the upper half of a man. A man with no face, just a wide mouth and no eyes. He had small slits for a nose, bat-like ears, all pale, almost translucent white skin, with a large tail and a snake rattle at the end that drags along the ground. He has long, rail-thin arms with hands double the size of any normal man. And their hiss is like that of an angry cat hissing at an intruder. The man said that the wire walks attacked the workers, and that they only made it out because they were only a few steps from the elevator. Well, when George heard all this, his blood began to boil. He gathered a dozen of the best shooters and hunters in town and formed a posse. Then they all went down into the mine just before sundown. Some of the town folks gathered outside the mine as well. As the sun set, intense gunfire could be heard from the inside of the mine, and then there was silence. They came crawling out of the darkness of the mine shaft like ants out of a nest, attacking anyone on the surface. Well, a few of the day shift miners and some town folk hid inside the cook shanty, staying quiet and out of sight as they watched the wirewalk suck the soul out of each and every man. They saw the concentrated fire from 6 men armed with lever-action repeating rifles take one of the wirewalks down before they themselves were overrun and taken down. In the morning, the survivors warned the surrounding towns. But all the towns came together, pooling their resources, and built 2 heavy iron doors to seal the mine shut. George Ravenwood's wife was struck with grief over the loss of her husband. She died a few days later from a broken heart. The mine was closed till 1972, when her father and son bought the land and began to modernize the place to reopen. They took out the steam generator and put a modern one in, and hooked up lights and electricity to the mine and all the buildings. Before they could finish and open up the mine for mining, they went missing. Some say it was a lizard monster with purple eyes, but who knows? I began to slow clap. Wow, bravo, that's a very good story, I said in a sarcastic tone. A question for you, though. If this is true, then what happened to Melanie? Someone from that family must still be alive. Well, the man replied with, Melanie became known as the Black Widow Bride. Some say it was the Native American curse stopping her from marrying, or the phantom of Henry Ravenwood himself making sure no one got his wealth. Every person Melanie married ended up dead just a few days after the wedding. The Ravenwood Manor sits on top of the big hill, far away from here, dilapidated and abandoned. As for Melanie, she was run out of town. Last anyone heard, she changed her name to Constance and moved to New Orleans, but I bet the curse still followed her. Well, I guess my property is kind of not normal then, I said. The man replied with, "No, there's this guy named Cole. Lives about 10 miles from you. That guy's property isn't normal." Well, as much as I'd love to hear that story, I said as I stood up, I'm going to take my $500, go buy a bottle of Jack, and party back at my place. In a week or so, I will open that mine. As I was walking out, the man shouted to me, "Hey, Mark." Now this froze me mid-step, as I'd never given him my name. I turned and croaked out, "Yeah?" The man took a shot of alcohol and said to me, "Wealth doesn't make you a successful man. It's what a man does with his wealth that defines him. Now greed, on the other hand, the need to be wealthy can make you make bad decisions. Decisions that can cause death and not necessarily your own. You do your best to heed my advice and not open that mine." I began walking back to my camper on my property. I stopped at the local liquor store and got a bottle of Jack and took long pulls from it as I walked. It took me over an hour to get home. Well, normally it's a 30-minute walk. Well, the difference tonight was staggering. Half the bottle got drained when I stumbled back towards the mine. I walked on to the iron doors, and just as the sun began to set, I started jumping and stomping on them. I began to shout out loud in my inebriated state. "Wirewalks, come here, Wirewalks. Wirewalks, yeah. I fell onto the doors, drunkenly laughing, my bottle of Jack landing next to the small crack between the doors. I bent down to grab it, muttering, damn, spilled my booze." I could just make out the faint sound of scratching like two rocks rubbing together, when out of the darkness of the mine 2 bony, pale hands reached between the crack of the door and tried to force the doors open. The chain and lock clanged, and they went taut. The doors slid about 6 inches open with such force that in my drunkenness I stumbled off of them and onto the ground. I sat up and saw the 2 white, almost translucent hands grab the bottle of Jack and pull it into the mine. "Hey, it's mine, hey." I put my hands up like an old-timey boxer from the 1920s. "Yeah, I'll fight you. Yeah, I'll fight you for it. Come here, you weorks." That was the last thing I said before I fell back down and passed out. I woke up to the sun high overhead. My mouth was dry as if I'd been eating cotton balls all night. My head was pounding like it had its own heartbeat. My arms, legs, and face were so sunburned that I matched the color of a lobster. I rolled over onto my stomach and got on all fours and proceeded to vomit up the contents of my stomach. When I expelled the last of my wings and whiskey from last night, I spit out the last of that thick abomination. I got up and staggered over to my trailer, which I had moved closer to the logging camp some time ago. I walked inside, grabbed a bottle of water, and greedily chugged it down. I made that lip-smacking sound in satisfaction, then promptly opened up the trailer door and vomited up the water and stomach acid concoction, the color closely resembling chicken noodle soup broth. I spent the next few hours lying on my bed sipping water mixed with hangover powder. Anytime I picked my head up more than a few inches from my pillow, it would feel like my brain was trying to force its way out of my skull. When the throbbing in my head got down to a more tolerable level, I started looking up numbers of mines to call to see if I could get anyone out here to look at the elevator and get it working. I used the landline phone in the cabin and called well over a dozen mines. Most places said sure, but when I told them it was the elevator at the old Silverhead mine, most of them quickly changed their answer to no. Some just laughed, and 2 even hung up on me. But I finally got a hold of someone who would look at the elevator. They said they do small commercial elevators, but would give it a look over. They mentioned that it wouldn't be for a few days, though. So I spent the next couple of days cleaning up the logging camp, trying to make it look as presentable as possible, and thinking about what I'd seen. That old man's story resounded in my mind, and I finally convinced myself that in my state of drunkenness, I'd imagined the doors moving and I just slipped and fell due to the fact I was drunk. As for the old man's warning, He was just trying to scare me with some urban legend. I doused the rollers and tracks the iron door sat on with WD-40 till the squeaking stopped and the doors rolled freely. The last thing to do was to cut the chain off the door, but I was still hesitant to do so. The day before the elevator maintenance tech was going to show, I called my buddy, who's a lawyer, and had him write up a legal waiver for someone who'd go into the mine to sign. This was basically stating that no one could sue me if anything bad happened. I also had him put a section in there about no one being allowed in the mine after sunset, which he thought was weird, but didn't argue. After he emailed it to me, he asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to. He asked how deep the mine is. I said I didn't know, but I think I would know how I was going to find out. I went to the construction site of the houses that I wanted to build. I grabbed 2 cinder blocks, a wooden rod, and 2,000 yards of rope on a spool. It was the yellow plastic kind that everyone just seemed to have, but no one can remember buying. I fired up the mine generator as it was getting close to sundown. Man, I thought to myself, I really need to do this kind of crap during the day. I set up the cinder blocks parallel to each other. I put the wooden rod through the spool of rope, and then put both ends of the wooden rod in the hole of each cinder block. It sort of resembled the winch on the front of a truck. I took a 1-pound kettlebell and tied it to the rope. Before I dropped it, I looked down the shaft and saw that there were lights on inside. Well, the old man was telling the truth. They did put lights in the mine. Even with the lights, it was still too far down to see the bottom. I took a pull from my bottle of vodka and pushed the kettlebell down the opening in the door. In no time it hit terminal velocity, and I used my shoe to slow it to a stop. Realizing that I couldn't just let this thing freefall, I had one hand on the spool and the other on the vodka bottle, and I slowly lowered the weight down the shaft and took pulls from the bottle at the same time. All of a sudden, the rope went slack. I pulled some rope up and released it a few times to make sure it wasn't hung up on something. A slight clang, clang, clang could be heard after I'd released the rope. Satisfied it was the bottom of the shaft, I looked around for something to mark that section of rope. My thinking was that I could measure how deep the mine is, and this would allow me to make sure the mine wasn't flooded. I cursed my stupidity when I realized that I'd left the marker in the trailer. I took a couple of steps away from the spool, when it started to move. It was slow at first, then got faster and faster. And then, bam, it was off to the races. The rope was now spooling out a lot faster than when it was going in freefall. Smoke started to come out of the end of the spool as friction between it and the rod was enough to burn the wood. The rope reached the end of the spool and went tight with a twang that echoed through the shaft. Wood smoke hung faintly in the air, followed by a cracking sound when the wooden rod snapped into 2. The spool, now empty of its rope, except the end that was secured to the spool itself, clanged off the iron doors. And then came a sight that freaked me out. The spool began to slide to the left, all the way to the end of the doors, and then all the way to the right, as if some unseen force was sliding it around. The rope broke with a loud bang. I ran to push the doors closed. Closing what little gap between the doors there was, I stared at the 2 massive iron doors. I looked at the remaining vodka in the bottle and took one very long pull from it, letting the clear, harsh liquid do its thing. I began walking back and forth, trying to figure out what had happened. Oh, think, I said out loud. It had to be a rock slide. Yeah, that's it. Some rock must have fallen off the side of the shaft, got entangled in the rope and pulled it down. Yeah, that's it. When the rock got caught, it caused the rope to swing to the side. I snapped my fingers then. That's it. Ain't no wild walks. It's all in your head, I said to myself and took another swig of vodka. Oh man, maybe I can market this creepy story for Halloween. I can see the sign now. Come one, come all to the cursed Silverhead Mine. Scary tour available every weekend in October. Well, cheers to me, I said, and raised the bottle of vodka in the air and downed the rest of it. The next day, as I was nursing what little hangover I had, the elevator tech showed up. I walked him over to the small elevator shack next to the big metal tower. He looked around and got to work. He came out a few hours later looking very dirty and said, "Well, I greased the bearing and the cable. They're in very good shape. The hydraulic brakes and the hoses look worse, though. Those will need to be replaced within a year or two." He walked me into the control room and showed me a lever that said up and down, and a red button that said emergency stop. He pulled on the down lever and the generator, which was already on, growled a little louder under the load. With a whining noise, the elevator moved down and made a loud clang against the iron doors. The elevator tech moved the lever to up, and the elevator moved up. The tech explained how it all worked, and I'm not going to explain it all. The short story is that the elevator runs on a track that goes all the way down, and there are two ways to operate this elevator. The buttons on the side of the override controls. When activated, the override controls located in the elevator shack override the controls in the elevator itself. There's also a big hydraulic brake similar to a car's disc brakes, but on a much bigger scale. The gravity brakes the two metal balls attached to a spinning shaft that, when spun too fast, gets expanded out and activates the brakes. The tech told me this was the part that was missing. When I looked at the big spool of cable, it read 1,000 yards on the side. "Hey, is there really 1,000 yards of cable on this?" I asked the tech. Well, the tech responded with, "Well, no." This caused me to relax, and the tech went on. "There's probably like 1,000 yards plus 3 to 5 yards of extra cable to account for shrinking and expanding in cold and heat." The tech wished me farewell and left me with the thought of how 2,000 yards of rope could possibly all be used up on a hole in the ground no more than 1,000 yards deep. I drowned my confusion in a bottle of coconut rum and stumbled my way into the old mining boss's cabin, and then staggered my way up the stairs and passed out in the chair. I woke up to darkness surrounding the cabin on all sides and the crackling glow of fire coming from the ground floor. I slowly rose from my seat and heard the ring of a telephone from below me. I quietly made my way down the steps and heard a voice yelling, "I don't care how many men it takes to clear that cave in. Get it done and keep digging." I could see the back of a man. He was wearing a cloak and a top hat. He slammed the yellow phone down on the receiver and then turned to look at me. His face was just a bleached white skull. As his dark eye holes looked up at me, he let out a hellish laugh and then flew towards me. Part 3. I woke covered in sweat, breathing heavily and hands shaking. The bottle of rum was on the ground. I picked it up and tossed back the last 2 gulps, which helped the shaking slow to a stop. The sun was now peeking above the trees in the east. I could hear the sound of music growing louder as a jeep with a group of kids came bounding down the winding road. "Hey, you made it. Welcome to the Silverhead Mine," I said. The group of kids got out of the jeep, and the excitement in the air was palpable. They started to unload their gear while chatting with each other. I went into my trailer to brush my teeth, gather my gear, and get a pot of coffee brewing. When I came back, I shook all their hands and said, "Hey, weren't there 5 of you guys?" Samantha replied, "Yeah, Dakota had other plans, but we were all ready to go." They handed me the rest of the payment. We made our way to the mine shaft, and I turned on the generator. I grabbed a very big set of bolt cutters from inside the generator room and walked over to the 2 iron doors. I put the head of the cutters on the lock, took a deep breath, and with a little hesitation, cut the rusty old lock. I pulled the chain through the door handles with a loud clang. Burns grabbed one door while Josh and I grabbed the other, and we all pulled. Thanks to my excessive amount of WD-40, the door stood open with ease. A rush of damp air assaulted our nostrils, causing Burns, Josh, and myself to take a step back. Samantha hopped into the elevator and said, "Well, let's go, people. Adventure awaits." I explained how I would like to send the elevator down first to make sure the shaft wasn't flooded. There's no point in going down there if we all drowned in an elevator. Samantha was disappointed, but Jessica and Burns nodded their heads in approval. We all went into the elevator control room, and I made a note to get hearing protection for this area. I used the controls to override and lower the elevator into the shaft. The guide wheel on the side of the elevator glided down the shaft effortlessly. The elevator tech really did a good job on everything, I thought. On the small digital display, we could watch a green digital square go down a red rectangle, indicating where the elevator was in relation to the shaft. When the elevator reached the bottom, the red rectangle turned green. I brought the elevator back to the surface. Other than it being cold, it was perfectly dry. Okay, we can go now, I said. We all got inside the elevator, and I pressed the down button. The doors closed with a soft chime. The elevator itself was spacious. Well, we only had 5 people, and it could hold 30. The elevator started picking up speed as it rocketed down the shaft. Well, it was louder than I'd expected it to be. I turned to the group and asked loudly, "So, why did Dakota not come along today?" Josh had just opened his mouth to speak, but Samantha cut him off. "Oh, her dad's really sick," Samantha explained. "She entered some game show to win money for him. What's it called again?" She started snapping her fingers, the sound lost in the elevator. "It's called, Fear Itself. Yeah, Fear Itself. She said she can win $50,000. Dumb if you ask me, but you know Dakota, she's dumb and she likes to take risks. Stuff like that'll get her killed." I looked over at Josh, Dakota's boyfriend, who looked uneasy. The rest of the ride down, no one talked. The elevator slowed down and then came to an abrupt stop, and a soft chime dinged out. I then said, "Ground floor, paints and bathroom windows," which got a light chuckle from the group. I opened the elevator door, and we all looked on in excitement. The lights were on in the mine. Jessica spun on me and pushed her finger into my chest. "Hey, I thought you said you were never down here. How come we have lights and electricity?" Well, I put my hands up in a placating gesture. "Yeah, they did some modernization in the 70s before it was shut down again. They probably put electricity and lights up then," I said. The room we stood in had to be 1,500 square feet, and the ceiling was at least 10 feet. Large wooden posts stretched from the floor to the ceiling. Small walls separated office spaces on one side of the room. The other side looked like a break room for the miners. A tunnel directly across from the elevator led deeper into the mine. Though the room and tunnel had lights, 1 in every 3 bulbs were burnt out or broken. There was just enough light to see, but not enough to stop everyone from being thrown in a creepy shadow. The air in the mine was damp and smelled of mildew. The walls were not wet, but instead were cold and clammy. I went over to the elevator, turned on my headlamp and looked under it. What I didn't see freaked me out. When I got back onto my feet, Jessica looked at me with some confusion. The elevator tech wanted me to see how much clearance we had between where the elevator stopped and the floor itself started, I lied. What had me spooked was that I couldn't locate the kettlebell or the 2,000 yards of rope that had somehow got pulled into the mine shaft itself. We spent some time looking around the area, discovering nothing much, and then started down the tunnel. The tunnel itself was big enough to stand 3 people abreast and had high ceilings. No one had any problems walking except Burns, who had to tilt his head sideways to avoid scraping it on the ceiling. We walked for some time and came across a split in the tunnel. One went left and the other went right. Both tunnels had an almost perfect 45-degree angle to the main shaft. We decided to take a left. After a while, the tunnel gradually turned back in on itself. Every 100 yards or so, there were smaller tunnels that branched off from the tunnel we'd originally chosen. Samantha chose one at random and said, "Hey, let's explore this one." None of the side tunnels had lights and were barely big enough to fit one person at a time. Burns and I chose to stay back. The sound of the group slowly dissipated into nothingness, and the main tunnel filled with awkward silence. I commented, "Man, when I think of mines, I think of wooden support beams every 10 feet or so." Burns looked at me, slapped the side of the wall and said, "Well, this baby here is taconite." "What's that?" I asked. "What? Taconite, well, it's a rock with about 15% or more of iron with quartz and carbonate interlayered. It's very strong and tough. It was considered a waste until the iron refining process got better in the late 50s. You said they tried to reopen in the 70s. That's probably why there's a lot of taconite down here. Although some people take it for granted, he said with a grin. Rock humor, I said with a dry laugh. How do you know so much about rocks and digging? I was in the army for 8 years as an 89 Delta, Burns said. I brushed my hand over my head while making an airplane noise indicating it was over my head. EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. Did that for 8 years. Did some training with civilian miners before deploying to Afghanistan and learned about how explosives act differently in enclosed spaces like caves and how different rocks can be effective. We wanted to disable IEDs so I wouldn't cause a cave-in. Yeah, 8 years, 725th EOD Company, 63rd Battalion, 52nd Group, 20th CBR&E Command. Burns said the last part while subconsciously standing straight up and with a lot of pride. We started hearing voices and footsteps growing louder as the rest of the group squeezed out of the side passage. Well, that was a bust. The side tunnel ends about 400 to 500 yards down there. There's a hole that goes straight up, but that's it, Jessica said. Well, let's keep going and see how far down the main tunnel goes. Worst comes to worst, we backtrack to where the tunnel splits and we go right instead of left. Now, onward, Samantha proclaimed. We walked for a long time. The main tunnel slowly turned to the right and the smaller tunnels to our left. We all agreed they must have been exploratory tunnels looking for silver deposits. Every now and then, we'd come across an old pickaxe head or a broken shovel. Hey, what's that? Burns asked. On our right, we found a tunnel just a little smaller than the main shaft, with a wooden frame around it. What looked to be an old wooden door made out of railroad ties was smashed outward and laying in the middle of the main tunnel. On top of the door frame was the word bathhouse carved into the wood. There were no lights inside this tunnel. The group turned on their LED headlamps and flashlights then. Right, let's go, everyone, Samantha said, and we entered the tunnel. Oh, go on ahead, I shouted. I want to look at this quickly. I looked down at the door and I could see claw marks from the side that would have been facing inside the tunnel. It was as if something was trying to break out and was successful in doing so. There was a lock attached to the door frame, which was ripped away from the door itself. With more questions than answers, I started walking into the bathhouse tunnel. After a little ways inside, I could make out a faint hissing sound bouncing off the walls of the tunnel. It was like a rattlesnake warning me to stay away. I froze in place and my hands began to shake. I reached into the side pocket of my jacket and pulled out a stainless steel flask. The long pull almost instantly stopped my hands from shaking. However, the liquid that was warming my insides did nothing to stop the rising level of anxiety I had. Just then, something behind me grabbed my shoulder. I spun around and saw bright green eyes. My flight or fight response kicked in, and I was about to run when I tripped over my own feet and fell to the ground. In horror, I put my hands up to defend myself when a voice said, "What are you doing?" I looked, and it was Jessica behind me. I put my right elbow on the ground and used my hand to prop my head up and put my left hand on my hip in a half-assed sexy pose and said, "Oh, nothing, just chilling, laying around. What are you doing?" Oh, she laughed at this and said, "What a dork," and helped me up. She looked at me with all the playfulness gone from her voice and said, "You know about the curse, don't you?" Curse? No. What curse? I stumbled like a middle school boy about to ask his crush to the dance. Don't BS with me. I looked up the Silverhead mine when I got home. Couldn't find a thing about it. Talked to my uncle, who's a miner. He told me all about the curse of the wire walks and the hissing sound they make, Jessica said with a stern voice. Well, yeah, but I don't believe in that stuff, I said, fumbling along. Jessica looked at me with skeptical eyes, took the flask from my hand and took a pull herself. She motioned then for me to come on. Well, we better go before Samantha gets herself killed. As we walked, our headlamps went back and forth, cautiously looking for anything out of the ordinary. The ground was smooth and the air was getting humid as we walked, causing water to drip from the ceiling of the tunnel. With every step we took through the weaving tunnel, the sound of hissing grew louder, like someone kept turning up the TV in the other room. We took turns taking pulls from the flask. So, what's your story? I asked as my hand shook from a forgotten memory. What? Like my history? We don't have time to open that can of worms. But there isn't much to talk about. My dad's best friends with Samantha's dad, and we did everything together. Family trips, school events, cookouts, vacations. You get the idea. Yeah, we've been best friends forever. Burns is Samantha's next-door neighbor. They even have the same birthday and were born in the same hospital. But, well, I'm the one to keep her out of trouble. You wouldn't believe how many times I had to stop her from going home with some guy at a bar. One of the bars in our hometown has nicknamed me the Blocker for obvious reasons. They even have a running tally on how many times I've blocked the dude. 36, if you're wondering. She said this with a giggle in her voice. Well, I didn't know if she was warming up to me, or if it was just the half flask of high-grade island rum that she'd drunk, but her hard edges were beginning to soften. They immediately went back to being hard as we heard someone shout, "Oh my God!" which was immediately followed by a scream coming from up in the darkness of the cave. Jessica then took off at a sprint down the dark cave. I downed the rest of my flask for liquid courage, and then took one step and fell flat on my face. That's when I noticed the broken light bulbs on the ground. I'd thought the bathhouse tunnel didn't have lights, but it did. It's just that they were all broken. A quick glance at the wall, though rough and uneven, I could see just what appeared to be claw marks. The sound of running feet grew more distant, so I forced myself up and ran after Jessica. I saw light coming from the end of the bathhouse tunnel. I saw the group standing around. Burns turned and put his hands up in a "it's okay, everything's cool" gesture. I slowed to a walk and saw a big open cave. Josh had gotten 2 portable spotlights out of his bag. Along the walls of the cave, I saw steps leading down about 6 feet long by 4 feet across. There was a lake in the cave. The water was about 40 feet down. The cave itself was cylindrical. The stars spiraled down and looked hypnotic. Samantha was at the bottom. And the hissing sound was now at the volume of a full roar. Or was that just the water falling from the ceiling of the cave? "Ah, it's so warm," Samantha shouted. Then she unzipped her backpack and pulled out what looked to be a black pipe. With a few clicks and clacks, she had a tripod with large circular lights on it set up. She hooked her phone up to it. She then took off her hoodie, revealing a low-cut tank top underneath. She pulled out a bag of dirt. I stared on in confusion, with just a little buzz. Her friends stood around, talking like this was a normal thing. She took some water from the lake and mixed it with the dirt to make mud. Samantha then started smearing the mixture on her arms, face and shirt. She turned on the circle light and shouted, "Hey, how do I look?" Jessica, who I'm assuming was just a little buzzed, shouted back, "Like a whore covered in dirt." Samantha smiled and yelled, "Perfect, thanks. Love you, girl." Samantha then tapped the phone and started to speak. "Hey, Sandwich Nation. It's your girl, Samantha. I'm here." Well, I said this part a little too loudly. What is she doing? The group, including Samantha way down below, let out a collective groan as if I'd interrupted some big speech. Burns pressed his fingers to his lips in a hush motion. I looked back down and Samantha was giving me the bird. Josh was shaking his head and Jessica was trying not to giggle. "Take 2, Samantha yelled out, but I felt that was more directed towards me. "Hey, Sandwich Nation. It's your girl, Samantha. I'm here in the Silverhead Mine going cave exploring with a group." As she was saying all this into the camera, I noticed a shadow rise up from the water. The 2 spotlights Josh brought created enough light to illuminate the room, but not broad enough to penetrate more than a foot or two into the inky black water below. The shadow looked like the front half of a person, with very skinny, long arms and huge hands. The back half had 4 legs, 2 on each side around a bulbous body that ended in a point with some sort of tail that trailed behind it. There was a ball shape on the end of its tail. This creature, whatever it was gliding under the water as silently and as stealthily as it could towards Samantha. I couldn't be sure if it was just a trick of the light combined with my slowly rising blood alcohol content, or if what I was seeing was real. I turned to ask if anyone had seen what I'd witnessed, when Samantha suddenly splashed the water and said, "Oh my god, the water's so warm. I'm thinking of having a cave beach party. Maybe I'll wear that new bikini I bought. Anyways, hit that follow button for more content." She then blew a kiss to the camera. When she slapped the water, the dark shadow quickly turned away and swam fast like a fish that had gotten spooked by a predator. It dove down under the blackness of the water and disappeared. Shortly after, we broke for lunch. We decided to eat inside of the bathhouse cave, on the overlook in the cave. The group packed sandwiches and handed one to me. I took a bite and nearly moaned in pleasure. Through a mouthful of sandwich, I said, "Holy crap, this is a good sandwich. Who made this?" Jessica responded with, "Well, Josh did. He's going for his master's degree in culinary arts. He smokes, seasons, and cuts his own meat." Well, this sandwich didn't just exceed my expectations. It took my expectations out on a fancy dinner date and then screwed my expectations' brains out, I said, and the group broke out in laughter. One day, Josh and Dakota want to open a wedding catering and DJ service called DJ Subs. Kind of like a one-stop shop for wedding cake, food, and music, Jessica said. I looked over at Josh, and he was beaming with pride. I asked, "So, Samantha, what's your story then?" Samantha looked at me with a dumbfounded expression on her face, like I should already know and that it's an insult to ask. "Why, you really don't know who I am?" Samantha said, pausing her bite into an apple. No, honestly, I don't," I replied. Jessica let out a snort and said, "Well, that's a first for her." Samantha started talking then. "Well, I'm a social media influencer. I have over 1 million combined followers, and I'm on all the major social media apps except OnlyFans." Jessica and Burns chuckled at this last part. Jessica playfully quipped, "Although people would pay a lot more if you were on OnlyFans." Samantha looked at me and said, "So, you really don't know me?" Well, I shook my head no as I crammed another sandwich into my mouth. "Honestly, I thought you recognized me in the bar and wanted a free promotion or something for this. I'm used to people just asking me to review their product or help them promote their business. Well, to be honest, I'm only in it for the money to pay for college. The whole stupid dumb blonde thing's just a front. I'm going to school to get my doctorate in oceanography." "Wow, have you ever thought to talk about that instead of playing an idiot on your videos?" I asked. "Yeah, but no one cares about the whales." Samantha laughed then. "I could talk about them and maybe a few would listen, but..." Samantha changed her voice to that of the Valley Girl. "Hey, guys like to look at my breasts. Like, what do you think? Buy this product, and if I can get 1 million likes, I'll wear a bikini." She then switched back to her normal voice and said, "Now that's how you make the money." The group, including myself, laughed at this. This clearly wasn't the first time this conversation had been brought up. "Well, speaking of product placement, I need to shoot and promote. Burns, I'll need you to come with me. I need a cameraman." Samantha and Burns stood up and began walking out of the bathhouse cave then. "You two behave now. No going past second base," Jessica said as Josh burst out laughing. The last thing we saw before they walked into the dark tunnel was them giving us the bird. "So, those two like an item or something?" I asked. "Oh, no. Like I said, they've been next-door neighbors since birth, and it's been a platonic relationship," Jessica replied. A sly smirk started to form on Josh's face. Okay, fine. I guess a few years back, before Burns left on his first deployment, he and Samantha got a little tipsy, and according to his army friends, they walked in on them. Samantha was tickling his tonsils, if you know what I mean, but I think it's just a lie. The three of us finished our lunch and walked out of the bathhouse and back to the main tunnel. We were just chatting and having a casual conversation when we heard a faint cry. "Help! I'm stuck!" the voice called out, and we all looked at each other. "Hey, no one else should be down here but us," I said. We started walking in that direction and found a tunnel that led to a massive open room that looked partially collapsed. There were no lights in this section of the mine. We heard the voice again. "Help me! I'm stuck!" But this time it sounded like a fake cry for help, like obviously fake. We could just make out the glow of a lantern in the darkness. The three of us saw Samantha wedged between two rocks and Burns standing there with a camera. And then Samantha said, "Oh, help! I'm stuck. I hope no one bangs me." She then held up a can to the camera and said, "Bang energy. How hard do you bang?" To which Burns said, "Cut. Perfect." Samantha turned and said, "Oh, hey guys, what do you think of my performance?" She easily unstuck her foot from the rock. I started laughing and Josh let out a snort which caused everyone in the group to almost double over in laughter. While wiping a tear away and trying to hold back giggles, Jessica said, "If you were going for a porn actress with no relationship with their father, then you nailed it." And this caused another round of laughter that was so loud it echoed off the chamber walls. We returned to the main tunnel after all the laughter and giggles had worked its way out of our system and continued heading in the same direction we'd started from. The main tunnel looped back onto itself, and we found ourselves at a 45-degree split, looking at the tunnel that led back to the elevator. The main tunnel did a full loop in a teardrop shape, so after a small discussion and looking at the time, we decided to walk back and call it an early day. Before we started walking back, I addressed the group. "Hey, yeah, I don't know how to ask this, but, would you guys like to come work for me over the summer as tour guides? On your days off, you can explore the mine and any connecting cave system free of charge, and of course I'll pay you guys." The group talked among themselves, and after a few minutes Samantha said, "Oh, absolutely, but it'll be another 3 months before we can start. Some of us are still in school after all, and it'll only be for the summer." "Well then, this calls for a celebration," I said, removing a bottle of tequila. Before I could open the bottle, Samantha grabbed it and yelled, "Well, let's drink up, bitches," and took a big pull from it and passed it to Jessica, who did the same. We passed the bottle around and walked down the tunnel to the elevator. Halfway back, Burns had a girl over each shoulder. They were trying to play patty cake with each other, but Samantha just ended up patting the top of Jessica's head, who was, at the time, passed out. We were stumbling our way to the elevator when I heard the sound of liquid hitting stone, and turned to see Josh bent over, throwing up. Jessica and Samantha were in the elevator already, sitting down when Jessica said in a drunken slur, "Hey, where are we going to sleep? I'm not sleeping with Mark. With more tequila maybe, but, I'm not sharing a trailer or whatnot." I became flushed in the face, and before I could respond, Samantha, also in an inebriated state, said, "Oh my God, Jessica, you slut." Jessica pushed Samantha over, and she fell on her face and made no attempt to break her fall. There was a tense moment of silence, when the two girls then started laughing. "Bitch, I love you," Jessica said sincerely. "Bitch, I love you too," Samantha replied. Burns looked over at me. He was slightly swaying, or maybe I was, because a lot of alcohol had been consumed. He said to me, "Well, what are the sleeping arrangements?" "Oh, I have a house with 6 bedrooms. It's got no power, but I'll get that figured out, don't worry." "Oh, sure, that'll work," Burns said. I looked down to see Josh clawing himself into the elevator before blacking out. These damn kids couldn't handle their alcohol. I was just about to close the elevator doors when I saw it, standing there. Its head was just about the same height as the tunnel, and it was slowly moving towards the elevator. Its pale white skin was unmistakable. It looked like the body of a praying mantis, with the torso and face of a man. It had no hair, no eyes, a big mouth, bat ears, and long, slinky arms. It pointed at me with one hand, and in the other hand was some sort of ball. It wasn't until this creature dropped it that I realized it was the kettlebell. It raised its tail and shook it, making a rattling hiss sound. Behind him, another one appeared, then 2 more, then 8 more, and so on until the tunnel was full of them, as far down as I could see. They all pointed at me. I closed the door to the elevator and looked behind me to see Burns helping the girls up and Josh still blacked out. God, I must be drunk and seeing things, I thought to myself. But I hit the up button and the elevator started to move. On our journey to the surface, the fingers of the wire walks followed me, accompanied by a chorus of hisses. When we reached the surface, the sun was about to set. I closed and locked the mine. Part 4. 3 months later. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the little details of getting the mine ready for tours. I was able to take out a small business loan. Light bulbs, flashlights, and hard hats were bought, and there were a lot of them. Portable toilets were brought in. The head of public works got a new Rolex, and the mine was hooked up to the power grid. The cook shanty had a TV installed for playing a short safety video. Trees were cut for firewood, and the parking lot was created. There were only 2 issues before opening day. The first one was when the group of college kids whom I'd given jobs to showed up. Jessica pulled me aside and told me that Dakota, Josh's girlfriend, had been found dead after they returned home. It turns out that she'd been boiled alive in that game show Fear itself. Well, I didn't ask for details. The second problem was when I went down to the bank to get coins for the cash register. The bank teller informed me they had no coins left. Well, the armored truck that was sent to make the delivery got a flat somewhere in the national park, and they didn't receive their shipment of coins for the week. But other than that, it went great. The first 2 weeks were slow. Maybe a handful of people showed up to take tours. Samantha had the bright idea of promoting the mine tours on her social media. Let me tell you, her fanbase is crazy stupid for her. People would show up well before we opened just to meet her. I had to take her off ticket sales as people would walk up and try to take a picture with her and then leave. Samantha, along with Burns and Jessica, gave the tours while Josh sold tickets and his amazing sandwiches from a kiosk booth out front. Each tour was about an hour and a half long, and a tour would start about every 30 to 45 minutes. We started 30 minutes after sunup and stopped an hour before sundown. Well, some people bought 3 tickets just so they'd have the opportunity to have a tour with Samantha. Well, after discussing it with the group, we decided to have a meet and greet every 3 weeks. The price was $100 a ticket and included dinner. We could fit about 90 people inside the cook shanty. Every meet and greet sold out. Although it was a lot of work, Josh never stopped smiling when he cooked that many meals. Burns told me it was the first time he'd smiled in months. After talking to some locals, I discovered the summer tourist season lasted about 3 months. It picked up again about a month later, in the fall when the leaves change, and then it was dead all winter, and picked up again in the spring. We were 2 months into the summer tourist season when the incident happened. I converted the 2-story log cabin into my office. I was sitting behind the desk going over expensive reports when there was a knock on the door. Burns popped his head in and said, "Hey Mark, I've got a guy here who wants to talk to you about something. He says it's important." "Well, sure, come on in," I said as a man in a polo shirt and cargo pants walked in. I was surprised by his very proper British accent. "Hello, good sir. My name's Theodore Adams III. I represent the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, and I have a proposition for you. I'd like to launch an expedition to explore the cave system inside the place you call the bathhouse. I gave him a questioning look and said, Well, Theodore, there is no cave system in the bathhouse. It's just an underground lake with a small waterfall. Theodore responded with, Well, old chap, that's where you're wrong. The water has to drain somewhere, and I believe there's a system of underwater caves and tunnels that could lead to some big discoveries. Theodore then slid a piece of paper to me with the number 1000 written on it. What the heck is this? I asked. Theodore chuckled and said, Well, the amount per day I'll pay you for an expedition. Well, hey man, I should probably tell you that the mine was cursed by a man by the name of Henry. But Theodore just waved his hand in my face and said, Oh yes, I'm well aware of the curse. That's why I want to send a team down to explore. I want to catch a wire walk and study it. Tell me, have you seen one? I stammered. Well, yeah, technically yes, but I was sort of intoxicated, I replied. Theodore's face lit up with hope, but was dashed just as fast. Theodore wrote another 0 on the paper and slid it back. I looked at it and then slid it back to him, and said, We can do it for that price, but you and your group can't spend the night down there. I lock the doors before sundown with no exceptions. And then steepled my hands together. Well, how about this? Theodore proposed. He took the paper, wrote something on it, and slid it back to me. That price is per day for a minimum of 3 days, but we get the whole mine, and you can lock us in if you want. Well, I looked down, and my jaw hit the floor. $1 million a day for a total of $3 million. Well, you got a deal. We stood up then and shook hands. Well, this calls for a drink. I reached for the bottle of Jim Beam that I keep on my desk. Theodore looked at me with one eyebrow raised as I began pouring 2 glasses. Hey, tad bit early, don't you think? Theodore asked. Ah, nonsense. This will be glass number 2 for me, I said, and looked over to see it was only 9:30 in the morning. We toasted and clinked our glasses. My cell phone buzzed. The cell service was still spotty, so I couldn't get phone calls, but every now and then a text would come in if I was lucky. It was my bank app saying $3 million had been deposited into my account. I cheered silently in my head and slammed my glass so I could fill it again. We spent the next hour or so hammering out the details. Now, to avoid alarming the guests, we decided we'd bring these men in under the pretense that they were setting up to film a movie in the mine. They installed a heavy security door around the entrance to the bathhouse, and I hung a closed for the week sign and gave everyone that time off. Samantha wanted to be in the movie, but I explained it was a documentary. It took them a day to bring in all their equipment and gear. There were divers, scientists, and support staff, about 24 in all. The first night they spent outside the mine, and the second day spirits were high as everyone was excited to begin the expedition. Theodore, my employees, and I stayed back on the surface. As they lowered into the mine, I didn't know then it would be the last time I'd see them all. When the sunlight of day 3 broke over the horizon, Theodore and I went down into the cave. When the elevator reached the bottom, the sight before us chilled me to the bone. In the room by the elevator were the discarded remains of a lab coat, a laptop, clothing, and some scientific equipment. No body, no blood. It looked like one of the scientists thought it would be fun to strip naked and throw things around. We walked down the main tunnel and saw more of the same thing. Clothing was laying around, some ripped apart, but others not. Personal items such as cell phones and wallets were still in pockets. We walked to the entrance of the bathhouse tunnel. Brass casings littered the ground. I bent down to pick one up. The back read, 556 by 45. Wait, you brought guns down here? I clamored. Well, Yes. If the stories are true, my men needed to protect themselves, Theodore stated quite boldly. Well, a lot of good it did them, I said. The heavy gauge security door was open. The inside of the door had dents and looked like someone went to town on it with a hammer. We walked down the tunnel and entered the bathhouse. To my horror, there was equipment all scratched up and broken, and there were empty rifles lying around. What looked like a jail cell on wheels had the bars bent and ripped apart as if an unholy abomination had broken out of it. The small generator used to power some of the equipment was torn asunder and smashed to hell and back. It was as if all the power and hate was directed at the generator. Computers were destroyed, wires and glass from scientific equipment laid everywhere. There were no survivors. No bodies found, just clothing scattered everywhere. Well, this is fascinating. I knew the stories say the wirewalk sucked the soul out of the body, but it looks like clothing doesn't seem to affect it, Theodore said. He picked up a still dripping wetsuit with a scuba air tank and breathing mask still attached. Just astounding this went about as good as I could have hoped. I was hoping for at least one person to survive, but that's progress for you, Theodore said, and I was taken back by the casualness of loss of life. What are you going to do about this? I inquired. Well, it's just like some of the expeditions to the Arctic that have never returned. I'm going to sweep this under the rug, Theodore answered. How can you do that? I said, while gesturing around to everything in the room. Quite easy when you have money. Just pay off their families and deny that this ever happened. I suggest locking the door to the bathhouse and not letting anyone in here. If word gets out, this'll end you. All that money you got from me, poof, gone. Yes, I recommend you get busy cleaning this up if you want to start doing tours tomorrow, Theodore said as he turned to walk away. I unscrewed the top of my flask, took a generous pull, and started to get to work. Cleaning up was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I picked everything up, tossed it into the main area of the bathhouse, and closed the door. Not to mention the looming fact that I could potentially lose my $3 million. Well, the job still took all day. Every time I thought I was done, I'd find something else to clean up. A wristwatch here, a few bullet casings there. Sundown was less than an hour away. I was making my way back to the elevator when I heard a fast banging and the sound of air escaping. I came across an old pneumatic mining drill, one of several old mining equipment displays set up along the tour route. There was a man dressed up like a miner from the 1800s. The drill and hissing came to an instant, almost creepy stop. Then the man turned and looked at me, but his face was just a massive black blob. He turned and said, I reckon greed's what got those men killed. He then turned and walked into the solid tunnel wall next to him. And I took off running. Oh, no, I said. Native American demon creature's one thing. Ghost, nope, not happening. I got to the elevator out of breath and started heading up. But then again, I said between pulls from my flask, I could totally market this as haunted and get more people to come here. And so the mine tours resumed. I'd made up some story about how the bathhouse was no longer safe, and that's why it has a door on it and how it's off limits to guests and employees. Summer was nearly over, and Samantha approached me and said, well, since we're closed on Mondays, I was wondering if the gang and I could take a group of YouTubers down in the mine for a tour. Well, I was reluctant, but after she told me how much propaganda the mine would get, and all the tourists it would draw in, well, I was more than willing. That evening, the 3 newcomers arrived. We talked and had a few drinks, and I said I was going to sleep in, so I handed the keys to the mine to Samantha. I took a pull from my flask and turned in for bed. I awoke to the sound of a scream. I ran to see the mine shaft door open. I slowly made my way into the elevator room to see 2 of the 3 new people. One was trying to comfort his friend on the phone with 911. The other guy clutched a camera, was laying on the ground, rocking back and forth. "Hey, what happened?" I demanded, but neither of them would tell me anything. All kinds of emergency vehicles were soon there. The sheriff and another man wearing a park ranger uniform approached me. The sheriff introduced the park ranger as Corey. He explained that because the mine is under the national park and is where the incident happened, that the park rangers would be taking over the investigation. I shook Corey's hand and walked him towards the cook shanty. "Hey, the 2 people are in here," I said. "No one else has been in the mine since you found them?" Corey asked. No, they haven't," I replied. As we got to the cook shanty, Corey opened the door, and I noticed his left hand was missing his ring finger. The one guy was still in shock, and the other was attempting to hook up the camera to the big TV in the cook shanty. The one guy looked at both of us and said, "Right, I think I got it." And the recording started to play. The recording. "Okay, we're recording now," the cameraman said. "Oh, why are you recording now?" asked Samantha. "Just getting some B-roll for Ray," the cameraman said. "Okay, whatever," replied Samantha as she turned to talk to someone off screen. "Hey, you know what your job is, right?" the person off screen said. "Yeah, as soon as you guys are down in the mine, wait 5 minutes and then raise the elevator back up. Then I lock the doors till morning so we don't get into trouble. But won't Mark hear the elevator running?" "No, he's been drinking more and more every day. He'll have passed out by now," Jessica said. The camera then pans to a man wearing a grey hoodie that says Ray's World on it. "Hey everyone, what's going on and welcome to Ray's World. Today I'm with my good friend Samantha," Ray exclaimed as Samantha jumped into the frame of the shot. "Hey Sandwich Nation, it's your girl Samantha. I'm here with Ray and the crew for a 24-hour overnight challenge in the Silverhead mine, which is allegedly the world's most haunted mine." The next shot was of them all riding down in the elevator as Samantha explained the history of the mine and about the curse. They all walked off the elevator and waited for it to go up, and Ray commented, "Well, there goes our ride for the night. Come on everyone, let's go explore." And cut. "Okay man, let's get some shots of how creepy this place is, and we'll resume in 10. Samantha led the group down the tunnel and split to the right. Every now and then the group would stop to do a dumb sketch or something. At one point Burns asked, "Hey, what's that?" As a soft hissing sound could be heard coming from one of the smaller tunnels. The camera turned down the dark tunnel where the hissing was coming from, and a set of glowing teeth could be seen in the darkness. The teeth lunged towards the camera from out of the darkness, and the cameraman screamed. Jessica started to laugh as she took out her glow-in-the-dark vampire teeth and helped him off the tunnel floor. Ray turned to the camera and said, "Remember to subscribe to Ray's World for more hilarious content like that." Then the camera cuts out. The camera comes back on as the group stands in front of the door to the bathhouse. Samantha starts to push the door open and says, "Hey, I hope everyone brought their bathing suits. It's about to get wild." "Hell yeah, dog. We about to swim in a lake underground," Ray replied excitedly. As the group walks, the cameraman hears a hissing and turns around to Jessica and Josh, who are talking. The cameraman says, "Hey, knock it off with the hissing. You got me once, you're not going to get me again." For just a split second, a dark shadow darts across the tunnel, which no one seems to notice. Confused, Jessica says, "What are you talking about? You're going cuckoo." The group then reaches the bathhouse room. Ray turns around and explains his plan. "Okay, let's get some shots of the cave here. Then I'm thinking I'll do a cannonball off the ledge and into the water for a shot. Sound good, everyone? Hey, hello, you guys listening?" The camera pans back to the group staring down at all the broken and smashed equipment at the bottom. Everyone starts to make their way down to the water below. "What is all this crap?" Ray asks. I don't know. Wasn't here last time we were here. We were told they were filming a documentary. Maybe they just left the broken stuff behind, Burns said. These are computers and test tubes and what looks like a centrifuge for blood. Hey, where are the cameras if they just left everything? Jessica wondered out loud. Oh, cool, look. Hey, I'm Rambo. Pew, pew, pew. Ray gave the sound effects as he swung around what appeared to be an AR-15, the barrel pointing at everyone. Burns came out of nowhere and grabbed the rifle out of Ray's hand and yelled, "How about we stop fucking flagging everyone with a rifle?" Chill, dude. It's not even loaded. Plus, it's a movie prop, remember? One smooth motion, Burns racked the charging handle, popped out the rear takedown pin and pulled the bolt out and inspected the barrel. He reached over in a box and found a rifle mag and examined it, his eyes going wide. This is M855 ball ammo. This is live ammo, not blanks, Burns said as he put the rifle back together and slung it over his shoulder. He slipped 2 mags into his back pocket. Hey guys, I'm getting a bad feeling about this place, Burns admitted. Maybe we should call it a day and just head back. We can't till sunup. That's the point of an overnight challenge, Samantha reminded him. She stripped down to her bikini and went into the water for a swim. The recording stopped and then started again with Ray standing about 10 feet up above the water and shouting, "Cannonball!" as he jumped into the water, making a splash. His head popped out of the water seconds later, and Ray said, "Hey, let's get another take on that. I'm going to go even further up." Ray then got out, and as the camera panned around the cave following him, there was a quick shot of Burns slipping a baseball-shaped item into his pocket, and Josh looking at something that resembled a large combat knife. The slapping of wet feet on stone echoed as Ray ran up even higher to jump from the ledge. "Hey, are you recording?" Ray asked, as the camera bobbed in an up and down yes motion. "Ray's World Cannonball," was shouted as Ray jumped into the underground lake with an even bigger splash. Jessica shouted off camera, "Oh, you ass, you got my hair wet, and I'm not even swimming." The ripples in the water calmed, but no Ray appeared from under the water. Several seconds went by with absolute silence. Then Ray suddenly popped up in a panic. "What the hell? There's something down..." But before he could finish the sentence, a big pale white hand rose from the water as Ray was flailing around. The hand wrapped around Ray's face, and with a quick plop, Ray was pulled under. Everything erupted into chaos in that instant. Samantha let out a shriek of terror and started swimming back to the shore. The running footsteps of Jessica came to the edge of the lake, ready to pull Samantha out. There was a click of a magazine being inserted, and the camera panned behind, in time to see Burns charge and aim the rifle into the water. The camera panned back to Samantha, who was almost back to the safety of the underwater lake's rock shore. Suddenly she let out a high pitch. "It's grabbing my..." Then she was pulled under, and Jessica screamed. Josh ran into frame, holding a large knife, and dove into the water. A few seconds later, Josh and Samantha appeared. Samantha, with a renewed look of panic, continued to swim to Jessica, while Josh was clutching the knife with both hands, stabbing down at something in the water. Josh then went under the water. Bubbles and foam churned where he was once floating. Then the foam became an inky black. Josh broke the surface of the water with a gasp. Jessica was pulling Samantha out of the lake, and Josh wasn't far behind. The 2 swimmers were panting and completely out of breath. Samantha was in tears, with her mascara running down her cheeks. She hugged Josh as he stood there, black blood dripping from the knife. Off camera, Burns screamed, "Hey guys, watch out!" First there was 1, then 2, then 6, then 20, then too many to count. The white, pale, eyeless faces rose above the waterline. Several loud bangs and small geysers erupted from the water as Burns started to shoot. The group took a few steps backwards. Burns, who was on one of those stone steps above, was shooting down at the creatures. Josh got only a few feet away when one of the creatures pulled themselves out of the water with their long, skinny, pale arms and grabbed Josh by the legs, pulling him back into the lake. With each passing second, more and more of the wirewalks rose from the water. Burns' shooting was dead on, hitting the creature's center mass with little pockets of black spray exploding out from where his bullets were passing right through. Everyone except Burns was on the top step, heading towards the tunnel exit that would take them back to the main mine tunnel. The camera turned back to see Burns reloading as the wirewalks made their way up the steps, almost tauntingly slow. Burns put 6 well-aimed rapid single shots into the lead wirewalk's head, and it collapsed to the ground. And it was pushed aside by the remaining army of the creatures. Burns kept firing at the wirewalks. One after another they fell under Burns' onslaught of bullets. And then the bolt locked back on the rifle. And Burns realized he was out of bullets as the group of monsters increased. More and more of them were coming out of the lake every second. Burns turned and shouted, "Get out of here!" as he pulled out a hand grenade. He gripped it, pulled the grenade away from the pin, and tossed it into the water below. Burns then produced a second grenade, pulled the pin, popped the spool, and chucked it at the nearest group of wirewalks. The sound of both grenades going off could be heard as the 3 remaining people, Jessica, Samantha, and the cameraman, made it to the entrance of the bathhouse and closed the security door. The 3 ran for some time and stopped. Out of breath, Jessica said, I think we're good." The cameraman set the camera on a rock and walked into frame. His legs were the only thing in frame. "What the hell are those things? Jesus, Ray's dead." Still trying to get her breath back, Jessica said, "The wirewalks, Native American folklore. It's been said that they suck out the soul of any living thing." The tunnel went quiet as the group tried to figure out their next move, until the sound of chattering teeth could be heard. The cameraman picked up the camera and pointed at Samantha, who was still in her bikini and dripping in water. "This sucks. It only gets about 50 degrees in here," Samantha stammered as her whole body shook. From an unseen hole in the roof of the tunnel, a pale, large hand reached down and grabbed Samantha by the head. The cameraman tried to say something, but his words of warning never made it out of his mouth. Samantha was propelled upwards into the mouth of darkness. Jessica screamed, and the camera pointed upwards as Samantha fell from the ceiling and landed on the cameraman. Her scalp had been pulled from her head, and blood ran down the surface of her face as she cried in pain. Just then, the wirewalk came out from the hole and picked Samantha up. It opened its mouth, and the color started to drain from Samantha's face. All this took place as the wirewalk was standing over the cameraman. Samantha went from a dark tan to ghostly white, to a dried-up husk, and then finally to dust. All that was left was the bikini she'd been wearing, which fell over the lens. Silence filled the room. Only the hissing of the wirewalk's tail could be heard. The cameraman was holding his breath as the wirewalk crawled up the cave wall and back into the hole. Jessica then quietly walked over to help the cameraman up and whispered, "I think they hunt off sound. Let's try to make our way to the elevator and just wait there until morning." So the 2 slowly made their way to the elevator. Right before reaching the elevator room, they both slipped into a small crack in the tunnel wall. This caused a rock to fall and hit the cameraman, and he cried out in pain. Almost instantly, a wirewalk appeared and tried to reach them. The camera cut to a wirewalk waiting in the tunnel right in front of the crack. "There's no way out of here. The sun's already up. This thing should be gone by now," Jessica whispered to the cameraman, and he whispered back, "Well, maybe when they lock onto prey, they don't leave." Jessica replied with, "Yeah, maybe. If that's the case, we're stuck down here until he eats something." Just then, the rumbling of the elevator coming down the shaft could be heard, echoing off every surface. The wirewalk again attacked the crack where the 2 were hiding, and the cameraman whispered, I'm sorry," and kicked Jessica with all his might, forcing her close enough to be grabbed. She let out a hellish scream as her body shriveled away. Her jet-black hair turned ghostly white as she dissolved to dust while her clothing fell to the ground. Then the wirewalk let out a loud hiss and walked away. The camera cut to the cameraman running to the elevator. Just as he was closing the doors, a large white face slammed against the elevator and caused the cameras to drop to the floor as the elevator began to rise. I turned the TV off and looked to the two remaining people. Corey said, "Hey Mark, a word in private. You two don't go anywhere." We walked back into the kitchens for privacy. I reached up to a shelf, found a bottle of cooking wine, and began to drink greedily from the bottle. The low-grade alcohol content did nothing to stop my hands from shaking. "Now, Mark, we have two options here. First option is you go public with this story, but if you do, then no one will believe you. You'll be forced to close the mine, and the national park will seize your property because your tunnel's under the park, as I told you. Option two is we sweep this thing under the rug, and we can claim the group of people went missing on a day hike. It happens all the time. We can say that your mine was closed for the day since you're closed every Monday. As for the social media accounts, well, I have a guy for that." "So, what's it gonna be?" Corey asked with a sly grin. "Can it really be that easy?" I replied. "Oh, but of course. We kind of do it all the time," Corey said. Well, I guess I want to stay open," I said. Good. You know these North Woods have secrets, and they need to stay secret. I knew I could count on you. Now don't worry, I can give the two guys a ride back to the station to fill out the report," Corey said. "Hey, can I still tell people about the curse to draw people to come to the mine?" I asked. "Oh, sure. Just no pictures or recordings of those things. It shouldn't be a problem. They only come out at night, right?" Corey asked. "Right. Only day tours and no pictures. Got it," I replied. "Okay, you two. Trespassing is a serious crime. I need to take the camera and the recording as evidence. Now I'll give both you a ride into town." The cameraman got up and followed Corey out to his park ranger truck. The other team member looked like he wanted to say something, but did as he was told. Both got into the ranger's truck. I noticed the faded red splotch on the window of the driver's side and a small patch of duct tape on the roof. Corey looked at me and said, "Yeah, I spilled a red slushy a few months ago, and it somehow stained the windows. You know those things are loaded with sugar and other chemicals. Oh, Mark, I recommend closing down for a while for, renovations." Corey air-quoted renovation. "It'll make all this look less suspicious when you're doing the cleanup." Corey got into his truck and drove the two guys away. I pulled out a flask, downed a huge pull, and smacked my lips in satisfaction. "All right," I said to myself. "Time to make some money. I really don't care how many people it takes." 1 month later. Well, it took until the end of September, but I got it all done. Well, now that it's just me, I need to wow the tourists. I upgraded the elevator with a few scary surprises and put TVs in along the way, talking about the mine and its history. All I have to do is give tours and hit the play buttons on DVDs after posting about what happened in the mine, leaving out, of course, the part about what actually happened to everyone. Well, I've been getting bombarded with emails. Turns out everyone wants a tour in the cursed Silverhead mine. Yeah, and I've got ghost hunters, cryptozoology, physics, paranormal investigators, you name it. They all want to come, and I'm booked up for the next 4 months. Not everything's been good, though. I've received some threats saying, "We know what you did." All of them have been from Samantha's die-hard fans. I actually looked her up a few days ago, and any evidence that she had any social media accounts is gone. Sometimes I see them walking in the mine or at the ticket booth. This has only happened at night, and only after I've had a few drinks. In order to get rid of the evidence, I pushed almost all of it into the bathhouse lake itself and let it sink to the bottom. The blast from the hand grenade destroyed all the lights but one. I decided not to replace them. Being so busy, I've actually had to hire an armored truck company to pick up my money. The first pickup is today, actually. So I'm going to mix a stiff drink and wait for them.
Return to Silverhead Mine. Art 1. This is a bag of dicks, shouted Mario as the armor truck bounced and banged down the old road. Why are we doing this again? Because the boss wants it done. I know it was a last-minute customer, but he's paying out of the butt for us to come pick up his money. I yelled back at Mario. I did not spend 25 years in the United States Marine Corps to have my back blown out in a beat-up POS truck on some godforsaken back road in the Northwoods, Alex. Why could we not have the nicer truck? Oh yeah, because someone blew a tire out on it, still at the shop waiting to get repaired, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Sure, blame me. I didn't do anything. I wasn't the driver, I shot back. Well, who else am I going to blame? Might quit and that just leaves you. Look, it's just around the corner, okay? I can see the welcome sign, I said. Next to the road was a 20-foot wooden cutout of an old western prospector resting his arms on the handle of a pickaxe with a speech bubble saying, Silverhead Mine Tours. Just turn left in 200 feet to go down as deep as 9,000 feet. A smaller sign next to it read, Haunted Mine Tours every weekend in October. Mario let out a snort and said, We're up north. Why is there a western-style prospector on the sign? Oh, and the second thing is the prospector is the one looking for gold and the miners mine it? Just doesn't make sense. Well, let's just get this stop done and go home. It'll be sundown soon, and I don't want to be out here in the dark, I said. We pulled into the parking lot of the mine and saw what appeared to be a giant tower above the tall trees surrounding it. The mine elevator tower, with its exposed metal frame, looked like some long-lost relic from a forgotten time. Next to the tower was a log cabin building that had a white-painted sign that said, Cook Shanty, which was squeezed between the building and tower as if it was an afterthought. A small freestanding building that said tickets stood nearby. Mario stopped the truck between a small 2-story cabin and the cook shanty. I hopped out of the truck and turned to Mario. Hey buddy, you want anything while I'm in there? Maybe some crayons to eat? I know you Marines love to eat crayons, I quipped. Hey, Mario snapped back. You never served in the armed forces. You don't get to make fun of them. The Salvation Army does not count as the army. I flipped Mario the bird and closed the truck door. I walked up to the ticket booth to the sound of thumbs tapping away on a phone, accompanied by the soft hum of a single overhead light bulb. An attractive, fit blonde woman was behind the thin pane of glass inside the booth. Without looking up from her phone, she said, Can I help you? Constant tapping sounded like she was going for a speed record of typing War and Peace on her phone. Yeah, I'm here to do a cash pickup. I was wondering if you could tell me where the cash office is. The woman, whose name was Samantha, according to her name tag, looked up at me. She gave me a wicked grin and said, Oh, it's in the mine. You'll have to take the elevator and walk down the tunnel until you see a door on your right. You can head right in. Mark will be waiting for you. I walked back to the truck to tell Mario the plan and then headed for the elevator. As I walked up to the elevator tower, I could see that the metal frame was all scratched up as if some monster had attacked it. Well, this immediately put me on edge. I scanned the tree line as I walked, leery of my surroundings as always. I stepped into the elevator. The floor and ceiling were made of plexiglass or some other transparent material. A down, up, and stop button were the only controls in the elevator. I closed the doors and pressed the down button. The elevator went down flawlessly for a few hundred feet, then stopped. A loud bang echoed through the shaft so loud I thought it was a gunshot. I looked up at the glass ceiling, and to my horror the cables attached to the top of the elevator began to break one by one. It was terrifying to watch. Every time a cable broke, the elevator would fall a few feet. With one cable remaining, I watched as the elevator groaned and shifted. And with one last pop, the cable broke and the elevator began rocking towards the bottom at terminal velocity. The end of the cables whipped around the slipstream. The brakes on the side activated and sparks flew everywhere. With the speed and force of a freefall, the brakes were ripped off the elevator. Looking down, I could see the bottom approaching fast. Oh, this is how you go out, Alex. In an elevator. Oh man, my wife will not be happy about this, I thought. I could feel tears run down my cheeks, knowing I had but seconds left on this earth to live. I said a prayer, and at the last second, I jumped into the air. The elevator came to a fast but safe stop. I looked up to see the ceiling, which was now black. A voice from the speaker said, "Thank you for riding the runway elevator. We hope you enjoy the rest of your tour at the cursed Silverhead Mine." Well, I opened the doors, stepped out of the elevator, and almost collapsed on the cold mine floor. My hands were shaking. Not freaking funny, I thought to myself as I stood there regaining my composure. I took out my cell phone, ready to call the boss and tell him I'm done. Too bad, so sad for this money pickup. It was then that I noticed I had no service this far underground. Might as well get this over with, I thought as I began shakily walking. I came across a TV mounted to the rock wall of the mine. A green flashing button that said, "Play," caught my attention. Boss makes $1, I make a dime. That's why I watch TV on company time. I figured, why not, and decided to press the play button. Cheesy western music started up along with pictures of the mine as the narration began. Back in 1869. 69, nice, I laughed to myself. This mine was started by a man named George Ravenswood, better known to his friends as Harry. The mine soon became prosperous. One day a sinkhole appeared on the surface. The Native Americans assumed it was because the mine was cursed with wheel walks. Now, these creatures have been described as a half-man praying mantis with a rattlesnake tail. They make the sound of a hissing cat and are said to suck the soul out of any man, woman, or child it encounters. An earthquake trapped several miners in the mine. George bravely led the rescue party himself and died during the rescue mission of the trapped miners. Now, some say the curse of the wheel walk still exists and was cited for the number of disappearances throughout the national park. I finished listening and let out a snort. I started walking and thought, I feel like I'm not getting the full story. Either that or they're using a so-called curse to cover up for poor mine safety. I walked down the mine tunnel and stopped once I reached the fork where it split into 2 different tunnels. The pretty blonde said to go to the left one and open the first door on the right. Took the tunnel to the left. On my way past old mining equipment, there was a TV with a green button next to it. Well, I pressed the button, and the TV turned on. This time, the video gave information about the equipment and how it was used. I was walking for a while when I heard a hiss like escaping air. I walked towards the sound and saw an old pneumatic drill leaking air. I continued walking down the mine shaft and heard another hissing sound. Must just be another piece of mining equipment. Well, I looked around and didn't see anything. I discovered that the sound was coming from a smaller tunnel on the left. I shined my flashlight into it and was able to make out a quick flash of white going upwards, which was followed by small rocks falling down. What the hell was that? I said to myself as I brought my hand down slowly to my pistol holster at my hip. Just resting my hand on it gave me the reassurance that I could handle anything down here, curse or not. I walked for a while longer and was about to give up and walk back when I saw a figure. It was tall and built like a house with a high and tight haircut. He turned and looked at me, but before I could call out to him, he turned right and walked out of sight. I swear he just walked into the wall of the mine. I quickly moved to find him and found a door on the right side of the mine. Above the door, carved in old wood, was the word bathhouse. I pushed the door open and began to walk down the dark tunnel. As I started walking down the tunnel, my boots echoed off the mineshaft walls. And how far does this tunnel go? What happened to the guy I just saw? I wondered to myself. I could hear a faint sound growing louder with each step. I walked into an open cavern to the sound of a waterfall. I shone my flashlight all around and down into a lake below. I let out a whistle. Damn, that's a long way down, I said out loud as I shuffled to the edge of the cliff. A few light bulbs illuminated the steps that were carved out of stone that led to a rock slab below. Where did this guy go? This place is a dead end. Maybe he went... My thoughts were interrupted when a sound that was very off-putting could be heard. It sounded like popcorn popping mixed with the sound of an old creaking door. I felt the ground shift. I pointed my flashlight down in time to see a crack forming the rock. I spun on my heels, preparing to run. As I pushed off with my back leg, my brain registered the horrifying feeling of nothing below my feet, followed by the sensation of free fall. The 40-foot fall lasted about a second and a half before I hit the water. This gave me just enough time to cross my feet and tuck my arms against my chest. I didn't know how deep the water was, but I figured being a human lawn dart was my best move. My flashlight was still clutched in my left hand. It smacked into my face when I hit the water. I tried my best to stay calm, but with the inky blackness of the water, I couldn't tell which way was up. Luckily, the flashlight still worked. I dropped it and saw it fall up. Oh crap, I must be upside down. I managed to grab the flashlight before it fell out of my reach and accidentally turned it off. I began swimming for all my worth. Felt like I was getting nowhere though. I have to ditch my vest, I thought. I reluctantly undid the quick-release straps and let it fall below. I was almost to the surface when I felt my foot catch on something. I looked down and screamed as a large, pale white hand wrapped around my leg. I hit it twice with my flashlight, but the angle I was at, I couldn't get any power behind my swings. I was running out of air, and the blackness started filling my vision. It was like looking through a keyhole. The lack of oxygen to my brain was causing me to hallucinate images of my wife and my dogs. When a hand shot into the water, I grabbed it and the person started to pull. My head broke the surface and I gasped for air. I got one big lungful before I got pulled back under the water by whatever had my leg. I kicked as hard as I could at the inhuman-sized hand, and kept a grip on the person's arm as if my life depended on it, which it did. The hand let go of my leg and I was pulled out of the water. I crawled onto the hard rocks. I coughed and hacked up water and was able to slowly regain my breath. Rolling onto my back, I managed to croak out a thank you between coughs. I shone my flashlight at my savior. It was a female with long, jet black hair. When she opened her eyes, emerald green looked back at me. I gasped and dropped my flashlight. It hit the hard stone ground and winked out. I heard a voice whisper out of the darkness and into my ear. "Bye, officer." I fumbled around in the dark until I found my flashlight and turned it on. Well, the place was empty. I looked all around, but no one was there. It's like she'd vanished. My legs were shaking and I sat down on a rock next to the underground lake. I know those eyes. I'd seen those eyes before. Then it hit me like a freight train at full speed. The last time I'd seen her was roughly 8 years ago, on the last traffic stop I did. On what could only have been the last normal day of my life. As I sat on a rock thinking about that day, I put the flashlight between my legs on the ground with its beam pointed at the lake. Suddenly, a wet smack echoed on the rocks. I looked down to see the large, pale white hand. It was the same hand that tried to keep me under the water. Another loud smack sounded as a second hand appeared on the rocks near me. A pale white head slowly appeared from out of the water. I noticed it had no eyes, just a mouth and small slits where a nose should be. Behind the creature, a rattlesnake tail broke the surface and began to shake. I sat there, more fascinated than scared of the monster. When it got about 2 feet from me, it tilted its head sideways like a curious puppy might do. I felt a tight tug as if something was pulling me towards the creature's open mouth. I began to feel weak. My skin looked sickly and pale. It's hard to explain, but it felt like my energy was being pulled from my body. I had to act fast since I could feel my body becoming weaker. I smoothly pulled out my sidearm, pointed it at the thing's head. My muzzle was only a few inches away as I fired. The whale-walk's head flung back, and almost instantly it felt like my being was snapped back into my body. It was like it was attached to a rubber band. The color returned to my skin along with a resurgence of energy. It felt like I'd slammed a Ripid energy drink. The whale-walk's head slowly moved back to face me with a wickedly evil grin on its face. I could see the small .40 caliber hole that was dead center on its forehead. It began to open its mouth, and I fired 2 more rounds into its large forehead. The whale-walk began to sway in the water as if he was drunk. I shot it 4 more times. The hands that were gripping the rocking floor lost their hold, and the creature's lifeless body flopped into the water with all the grace of a 10-year-old pushed off the high dive at the public pool. Well, look at that. I killed the whale-walk. The curse is broken. I'm a hero, I shouted at the top of my lungs. I heard a splash then and spun around to see 3 more of them now standing on the rocks. They were 8 feet tall and ugly as all hell. I fired 2 rounds into each of the wire-walks. They swayed as before, but did not go down. I fired 2 more times, and then the slide on my pistol locked back. They must have known my Glock was empty somehow, because as I was trying to change magazines, they rushed me. Knowing I wasn't going to be able to reload in time, I scooped up the flashlight and threw it at the closest wire-walk. It sailed harmlessly past him and clattered onto the ground behind him. I closed my eyes and held my breath, waiting for the impact to knock me over, but nothing happened. I opened my eyes, and it was pitch black. I activated my weapon's light, and I saw the 3 wire-walks near the flashlight I'd thrown. I shone my weapon's light right at them, but they didn't notice. I turned the light to strobe, turning the whole cave into one big-ass techno club, but still nothing. Damn, they must locate their prey based on the sound, I realized. I slowly made my way up the steps and out of the cave. I was 2 steps from the top when I felt my nose tickle. Oh no, a sneeze was coming. I tried my hardest to hold it back. My nose began to burn and my eyes watered. Unable to stop it, I let out a loud sneeze. That alerted every wire-walk in the cave. Crap, I shouted in my head as I took off running to the sound of sharp claws on stone closing in on me fast. I reached the end of the tunnel and went right back down the way I came. I slipped on a wet patch of the floor of the tunnel and fell. This caused me to grip down harder on my pistol, and my finger slipped into the trigger guard and resulted in an accidental discharge. That's piss-poor trigger discipline, Alex. I thought I saw the round skim along the ground, hit a rock and ricochet around the tunnel. The wire-walk stopped, and their heads snapped back and forth, trying to get a fix on the sound of the bullet as it bounced off the hard surface of the tunnel. Okay, maybe I can get out of this. I was hopeful until I slowly and quietly got to my feet and saw dozens upon dozens of the creatures crammed shoulder to shoulder with each other, along with a few of them crawling on the ceiling of the tunnel. Then, one of the wire-walks locked onto me. I don't know if it was the sound of my breath or just bad luck, but it let out a hiss and lunged. I pointed my pistol at a 45-degree angle from the tunnel wall and fired. The sound from the gun discharging was overwhelming, and the discomfort to my ears almost caused me to scream in pain. I couldn't hear it, but from the way the wire-walks' heads were moving, I knew my bullet was bouncing off the walls. And this gave me the few seconds I needed to run. I was in fairly good shape, and with my bullet-resistant vest now somewhere at the bottom of the lake, it made running much easier. I was going at a dead sprint with what can only be described as military-grade tendinitis ringing in my ear. Not wanting to look back, I did a 10 count in my head and cracked a round off behind me. It must have worked. The mind does crazy things sometimes under stress. I actually started laughing, thinking about how this was just like my experience in the North Woods. "Hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it," I said, although I was unable to hear my words thanks to the gunshot. I could see the elevator up ahead when one of the wirewalks came out from a hole in the tunnel's ceiling and landed in front of me. I fired a round at the wall behind me and brought the pistol around to fire in front of me. I pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. Out of instinct and years of training, muscle memory kicked in. I brought the gun up to my face, tapped the mag, and rolled the gun so the ejection port was facing down and racked the slide. The undischarged round ejected out, and the slide locked back. I released the empty mag, inserted a fresh magazine, and racked the slide. This occurred a lot faster than the time it would take to explain my actions. With the pistol back in battery, I pointed it at the wirewalk. While still running, I shot every round in the magazine, but missed a lot of the 15 rounds. I think 3 might have hit the wirewalk center mass, which did nothing to the demon. I had just enough time to holster my pistol, put my head down, and body check the creature. Given the mass and size of the wirewalk, I pushed it back a foot and stopped. I felt its long, bony fingers wrap around the back of my duty belt and pick me up. Now I was face to face with it. It tilted its head at me and looked at me quizzically. I thought about going with my sidearm because it's out of ammo, but that little voice in the back of my head told me I wouldn't be fast enough. I could see that one of my bullets hit the wirewalk's upper cheek. Black, almost oil-like liquid oozed out of the wound. The wirewalk lifted his tail and rattled it back and forth, as if to call the others. I was trying to stay calm, just knowing that any sudden movement would cause the wirewalk to attack. I couldn't figure out why it held me there suspended in the air. Was it waiting for the others to show up? All of this raced around in my mind as my hand brushed against the pocket on my tactical pants. The magazine. The empty mag from my pistol was in my pocket. I took it out and an idea formed in my head. I started banging the base plate of the mag against the steel toe of my work boot. The spring inside the mag was letting out what I assumed was a twang with each hit. Twang, twang, twang. Its mouth opened and I could feel life being drained from my body. A sound like a waterfall came out of me. I felt my body get flung around, the grip on my duty belt slipping off the wirewalk's hands. I landed hard on the ground, quickly rolled over, and I could see what looked like 3 or 4 of them entangled on the ground. I took the empty mag and threw it as far as I could. Jeez, I can't believe that worked, I thought to myself. The wirewalks that were chasing me heard the twang of my empty magazines hitting my boot and just attacked the sound, which happened to be the wirewalk that was holding me. I then ran to the elevator and closed the gate as the creatures were starting to untangle themselves. More started to come towards me, and to my horror I saw that one of the bullets I'd fired at a dead run found its mark. It was dead center in the elevator control panel. The up button was intact, thank God, but the stop and down button were obliterated. I pressed the up button so hard I could feel my thumb pop. The elevator rocketed upward. I flipped them the bird as the wirewalks began to shrink below me. Once the elevator reached the top, I got out and started to speed walk away. My ears were still ringing. It was a loud buzzing sound that made everything sound like I had a wool blanket wrapped around my head. I then remembered my sidearm. I stopped walking to reload it. As I did so, I noticed something odd. All the clicks and clacks you'd expect to hear were not there. It was like someone had just turned my life on mute. Just then, I heard a muffled sound like someone yelling. I just holstered my gun when I heard it again. Looking up, I realized that I was in line with the cook shanty. The armored truck was barely visible. The dome light was on, but no one was in the driver's seat. I heard the same voice from the mine whisper to me again. "Run, you idiot." I took off at a sprint toward the armored truck. I managed a few steps before I saw movement in the shadows between the armored truck and the cook shanty. A figure appeared holding a rifle and leveling it at me. It was then that I heard a voice clear as day. This voice sounded like it belonged to someone who spent most of their existence yelling at people. Someone who used to give orders. And the voice yelled, "Alex, down now." I dove to the ground as fast as I could, actually getting mad that gravity would not let me fall faster. Thunderous boom from a rifle could be heard as it began to fire a slow, steady boom like the bass at a nightclub. I looked up to see two very well-polished boots at eye level with me, followed by a hot metal which landed on my neck. I rolled over to see Mario with his M1A SOCOM, which is a shorter version of the US military's M14. The stock was against his shoulder, and his shooting posture was perfect. He was banging away with that rifle, a shot being fired every second like the world's deadliest metronome. He swapped out his empty magazine in a blur and continued firing. With each muzzle flash, I could see his face like a snapshot. Each time the rifle boomed, he was grinning from ear to ear, which made him look 30 years younger. He was a happy Marine. Part 2. I looked behind me to see dozens of wireworks laying on the ground, not moving. The 308 was hitting with much more kinetic force than my .40 caliber pistol. It was putting them down and keeping them down. An empty magazine hit me right in the face as Mario continued the onslaught. A thought popped into my head from one of the firearms instructors. Pistols put holes in people. Rifles put holes through people. As another magazine hit my face, Mario yelled, "I'm out." He grabbed me by the collar of my shirt, and with what seemed like no effort at all, he picked me up and said, "Marine, we are leaving." He shoved me toward the cook shanty. I looked out over the area between me and the elevator. There were over 3 dozen wireworks lying on the ground with the back of their heads blown out. I was so shocked that I stopped running and just stood there, mouth agape. Mario ran up, shoved me, and shouted, "Unless you are trying to catch a flying rooster in your mouth, close it and keep moving. We're not done with this fight." I looked closer and saw at least 30 more crawling out of the mine shaft and coming towards us. In its mad dash to get to us, one of the wireworks crashed into a telephone pole, snapping it like a toothpick and knocking out the power to all the buildings. I ran through the double doors, gasping for air. Mario looked like he wasn't even breaking a sweat. He spun around and was trying to figure out how to lock the door. In a move of sheer genius, Mario took his rifle and put it between the 2 pull handle loops on the door. He disconnected his rifle sling, wrapped it around the handle for good measure, and tied it off. The door began to shake and groan as the wireworks tried to push their way into the building. The sound of cracking plastic could be heard as the polymer frame began to bend and flex. After a brief moment, the sound stopped. I whispered to Mario, but in my current state it came out as a shout. "Do you have any more ammunition for that rifle?" Mario looked at me, cupped his hands around my ear and said, "If I did, I wouldn't be using it as the world's most expensive door lock." I gave him a shrug that meant, "Okay, fair point." "We need to clear this building of hostiles," Mario said, and I gave him a thumbs up. Under the glow of emergency lights that cast everything in eerie long shadows, we walked over to the first door we saw. Mario pointed at me and gave the number 1 sign and pointed to go right. He then pointed at himself, made a number 2 sign and pointed to the left. I nodded my head in acknowledgement, unholstered my pistol and had it in the low ready. Mario opened the door and stood to the side. I went in first and turned right with Mario close on my heels as he swung left. We cleared the kitchen attached to the cook shanty. We did this for each door we came up to. Most of the rooms on the other side were small closets. One of the doors led outside, but luck was on our side as no creatures were around, so we immediately retreated back into the cook shanty. "Last door," Mario said as he opened it. I rushed in and hooked right, my weapon light activated. I saw a man sitting in a chair behind a desk. It looked like he was sleeping. I fell back on my training, and without even thinking, I yelled, "Sheriff's Department, show me your hands. Do it. Do it now." Mario grabbed the guy out of the chair and put him on the ground. I holstered my pistol and went hands on, putting my knee next to his elbow and moved his right hand to the small of his back. I placed my other knee and leg across his back on the shoulder blade and grabbed his other hand. Holding both of his hands in one of mine, I reached on my belt for cuffs. A surge of panic washed over me when I couldn't find them. Then I remembered that I don't carry them anymore. I looked up and saw Mario smiling at me like a lion proud of his cub taking down his first gazelle. "Mario, restraints," I demanded. The former gunnery sergeant handed me a roll of duct tape. With Mario's help, we tied the man up. "Dang, you jumped on that guy like a fly on crap," Mario said. "Hey, is he dead?" he asked. "No, he's drunk, passed out. I've seen it before. Also, the trash can is full of empties, which was a dead giveaway. He's breathing and also has no wallet or ID. We just need to wake him up." Mario cracked a grin and said, "Well, Deputy, would you like to do the honors?" And that grin was contagious. I could feel one of my own forming on my face. I put my hands up in mock surrender. "Oh, no, Gunny. The pleasure's all yours," I said sarcastically. Mario let out a snort. "You know how many times I woke up to Lance Corporals doing this? Way too many." With the stranger sitting up in the chair, Mario closed his fist and placed his knuckles firmly against the man's sternum and vigorously started to rub. After a few seconds, the man let out a groan and his eyes fluttered open. He looked around in panic. As soon as he realized his arms were tied up, he started to hyperventilate. The light from an LED lantern we found was the only thing lighting up the room. Well, the man yelled, "I gotta close the mine." Mario grabbed his shoulders to hold him still and got right in the man's face. In a calm, upbeat voice bordering on the edge of sounding like a psycho killer, Mario asked, "Hey, buddy, care to tell us what kind of grab-ass goat rodeo is going on here today?" "My name's Mark. I own this mine. Now, let me go. I have to close the doors to the mine. You don't understand the danger we're all in." "Yeah, about that. A little late for that," I said in a long, sarcastic tone. "What time is it? Who are you people? Let me go." Mario looked at his watch and said, "It's 18:13 hours. We're with the armored truck to pick up your cash." With a quick wrist flick, I opened my pocket knife and was about to cut Mark loose. "Hey, hold up, Alex. Before you cut him loose, he needs to tell us exactly what's going on here and what those things are." Mark's eyes got as big as dinner plates. "You mean they got out?" "Oh no, that's not good," Mark said anxiously. "Okay, so let me explain. When a man named George Ravenwood owned this mine, he did some bad things to good people. The land was cursed by a local Native American tribe. Demons called Wild Walks attacked everyone, so the surrounding towns came together and built the iron doors to seal the mine shut. But the curse remained after all these years. They hunt based on sound, and if they come out into the sun, they turn to dust." "How many are there?" Mario asked. "Don't know, probably 60. They only come out at night, so I lock up the mine before sundown and never get an actual count," Mark replied. "Where are the other employees?" I asked. Mark gave me a quizzical look. "Other employees? No, it's just me." "No, there was a girl that was working in the ticket booth. She's blonde hair and an athletic build," I explained. But Mark looked at me, confused. I let out a sigh and mumbled, "Really nice rack." Mario perked up at that. Mark looked at me in horror as the realization slowly sunk in. Was there anyone else you saw?" Mark asked with a shakiness in his voice. "Yeah, one tall guy with a high and tight military haircut and one chick with the most emerald green eyes I've ever seen. I swear I've seen her before." "Oh, fudge me," Mark exclaimed. "I hired some college students to give tours and something really bad happened." We cut Mark loose and he spent the better part of an hour explaining everything that had happened and the horrific details. "You are a monster," I proclaimed. "What, so there are ghosts?" "Ghosts are not real," Mario said. "You sent lead into the brainstems of demons, but ghosts are where you draw the line," I replied. Yeah, it's a matter of principle, Mario said. Well, that's not... No, but you know what, just whatever, I said. Just wait just a second. If they hunt based on sound, why have they left us alone this time? I don't know. There's probably something louder outside, Mark answered. Mario peeked out the window and said, Well, there's your loud noise. We joined Mario at the window and saw about 20 of the wirewalks swarming over our truck, trying to get at the loud diesel engine that was protected under armor plating. Mark got closer to get a better look and said, Perfect. We'll just wait them out until morning. They'll either go back into the mine or die in the sun. Hey, this calls for a drink. Mark walked over to the bookshelf and poured a flask out from between two books and took a long pull. His hands were shaking the whole time. You boys want to tie one over while we wait? Yeah. What time's sunrise? I asked. Mark smacked his lips and tossed the flask away. He was rooting around the cabinet under the bookshelf for more alcohol and came up with a bottle of Knob Creek. Well, it's not till 7 a.m., or as you military people say, 0700, he said, giving a half-assed salute. Mario turned from the window, pure anger radiating from him. I turned to respond. Hey, Mario, it's cool. Remember, we don't want to draw the attention of those things outside. One of Mario's eyes was twitching. He stomped up to Mark and said, Oh, it's not a number, you mother jumper. Oh, it's the sound my wife made for 3 hours straight on our honeymoon. It's 0700. Mario continued on, his rage slowly subsiding. It doesn't matter. The truck will run out of fuel in about 3 hours or so. We were going to fill it up at that shitty little gas station at the edge. I cut Mario off. Hey, Mark, is there a landline phone we can use to call for help if our cell phones don't have service? Mark let out a hiccup and with a slight slur said, Yeah, it's in the cabin over there, he said, pointing toward the window. Mario started grinding his teeth like he was eating his own jaw. You mean the cabin between us and the armored truck? The same armored truck swarming with those things around it? Mark had the bottle to his lips and gave a nod. In less time than it would take to describe it, Mario lunged across the room and slammed Mark against the wall, stunning him. Mario even managed to grab the half-drunk bottle of Knob Creek and hold on to it. In a deep growl, Mario threatened, Listen here, you rooster sucker. The bar of expectations is at the ground, yet here you are with an effing shovel. I swear to heaven you must have 2 brain cells left and they're both battling it out for 3rd place. Well, I was caught between helping Mark or just falling over laughing at Mario's words. By the time I was ready to decide, Mario was starting to wind down. If you were one of my recruits, I'd have you outside apologizing to the tree for his extra work to provide you with oxygen. Hey, Gunny, you good, man? I asked, while trying to hold back my laughter. Yeah, I'm good. Sometimes you gotta yell at stupidity extra loud, replied Mario. Well, that's all well and good, but we need to find a way out of here. As soon as the truck runs out of fuel, our goose is cooked. Hey, do you have your portable radio? No, I left it in the truck. What about yours? Mario replied. It's at the bottom of the lake. It was attached to my vest. Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you, ninja crawl over to the cabin and call for help? Mark said in a drunken slur. You know what, Mark? I'm going to start calling you Baskin Robbins because your 31 flavors are messed up. You do know that, right? I let out a snort and said, well, it could be done if we're stealthy enough. Oh, the police will not come out this far. Last time I called 911, the park ranger showed up. It is their jurisdiction, Mark said. No, park rangers, I blurted out. Well, the other two looked at me in confusion. I took a deep breath to calm myself. No park rangers. Park rangers and I don't get along very well. Mark sat down in the chair behind his desk and said, Well, I know what I'm going to do. Gonna sit back and relax with my favorite drink and listen. Listen to you two figure out a solution to this problem. Mario grabbed the bottle of bourbon from Mark's hand. He took a pull and smacked his lips and then handed the bottle to me. I shrugged my shoulders, took the bottle and said, when in Rome. The harsh liquid burned my esophagus as it made its way down to my stomach. I started to cough. Between coughs I said, smooth. Mario and Mark both let out a little laugh. We need to assess what we have available to use. Look for what's going to help us implement and improve our odds of escaping, Mario announced. Now, everyone empty their pockets. Mario and I started laying everything out on the desk. Amidst the pile, there was a pocket knife, wallet, and keys. Suddenly, Mario started to grin. Looky what I got here. He held up a silver device about the size of a thumb drive. You got the dead man's switch, all right, Gunny. Mario looked at me inside while he pinched the bridge of his nose. Hoo-ha is Army. Hoorah is the Marines, and ouch, I got a paper cut for the Air Force. Mark butted in. Hey, I got questions. Well, not to sound stupid, but... Mario cut him off. Too late for that, Burgundy Cherry. But what's your question? Mark completely ignored the insults and continued on. What's the dead man's switch? I spoke up. Without getting too deep into all the security components of an armored truck, the dead man's switch is a device that protects against hijacking. If the truck is driven too far away from the device, the truck will shut down, lock the doors, and call the police. However, with no cell phone service, it will not call the police. With that in mind, I have an idea, Mario said. 1 hour later. Let's go over it one last time, Mario said. I'll take the dead man's switch far enough away that it shuts the truck off. Alex, you and Green Mint Stick will make your way over to the elevator control shack and turn on the generator. Peppermint Fudge Ribbon here will write it down and make a bunch of noise to draw Weir Walks away and down into the mine. Then Alex will stop the elevator halfway down the shaft. Mark spoke up. Then I just wait until morning and ride the elevator up and push all the wire walks up with it until they hit sunlight and bam, they're all dead. I still don't see why I have to be the one in the elevator. I replied with, 1, it's our truck, and 2, it's your mine, so it's your problem. 3, someone has to stay and switch the elevator back to manual operator because the down button doesn't work. Finally, number 4, we're the ones with the guns. Yeah, once Lemon Sherbet is in the elevator shaft, Alex will walk to the truck and I'll circle back and we'll ride off into the night, Mario finished. We made our way back to the door. Mark grabbed a cast iron pan and a large soup ladle to make noise with. Mario untied the rifle strap and pulled the rifle out from the door handle. It looked beat up, but was in working condition for the most part. Mario silently made his way toward the woods, while Mark and I made our way to the mine shaft opening and the shack holding the generator and controls. We primed and got the generator ready. Mark handed me a set of walkie-talkies. As I stepped outside, I could see the wire walks all over the truck. Oh, it's going to be hard to explain the new scratch marks and missing paint, I thought to myself. The faint rumbling of the truck ended with a sputter and cough. The dark, still silence was only broken by the occasional scratching sound of claws on metal accompanied by a hiss. I walked inside the small shack and closed the door. Mark fired up the generator and the elevator's control systems came to life. Mark handed me a set of big, puffy headphones for hearing protection. My hearing was almost back to normal, and I didn't want to ruin it again. "Here are the controls," Mark said in a shout. "This is the elevator manual override here. Once engaged, the only way to control the elevator is in this building." He pointed to a display screen with a long rectangle representing the elevator shaft and a square that represented the elevator itself. He put a piece of tape in the middle of the rectangle. "I'll stop the elevator here," he said, pointing to the tape. "That's the halfway point. Make sure you throw this lever." He pointed to the lever that said override. I'll give me control of the elevator again. Otherwise, I can't use the control in the elevator itself. All right, let's go. Mark stepped into the elevator and yelled, "Wait 1 second." He ran behind the generator, knocking over a large set of bolt cutters. He returned with a 3-liter bottle of Jack Daniels. He walked past me, patting the bottle and said, "I can't forget Uncle Jack." I shook my head in utter disbelief, but remembered that addiction is a powerful thing. I started to slowly lower him down. I could hear the clanging of the soup ladle against the pan. Mark came over the radio. "Okay, drop me down. I got their attention." The humming of the generator was quickly drowned out by the sound of running feet and hands thudding against the ground. I watched on the screen as the elevator quickly descended. I stopped at the halfway point. A few moments later, the elevator dropped a little and the screeching sound of metal on metal could be heard. I ran over to see what it was just as the radio crackled to life. "Everything good up there?" Mark said over a wave of static. The sound was the brakes pressing against the brake disc. It was holding, but any major bump would cause the brakes to slip just a little. I replied with, 10-4. The brakes are struggling to hold the weight of the elevator and the wire walks. Just try not to move around so much. I monitored the brakes for a few more minutes and radioed in. "Okay, Mark. I'm going to switch it over to manual now." I was just about to throw the lever into manual mode when the door suddenly flew into the room. I mean flew. It snapped the hinges and the locking mechanism in one go. In front of me stood a wire walk, breathing heavily and looking like it was here for revenge. It had a long cut along its cheek where my bullet had grazed it before. Visible bruises and welts could be seen where it was tackled by its compatriots. I quickly pulled my pistol out. I defaulted to my training and activated my weapon light, setting it to strobe, trying to disorient the charging creature. I fired as the creature ran towards me with pure hatred. It was ignoring the sound coming from the mineshaft and apparently went out of its way to find me. I fired once, then a second time, not aiming for the head but getting shots on center mass. The slide on my pistol looked back just as the wire walk slammed into me. My gun skidded out of view before I could get to my feet, and I was picked up and thrown across the room. I landed by the big spool of elevator cable. The wire walk was seeing nothing but red, or I guess in his case, hearing nothing but red. It charged at me and got entangled in the myriad of hoses, cables, and other elevator parts. The wire walk tried to reach for me. I was stuck in the corner, unable to move. Fortunately, I was just a few inches out of reach. I looked around for a weapon and remembered that I had my pocket knife. Pulled out my Smith & Wesson border guard knife and tried my best to stab the hand. I got 2 stabs into the palm when the creature's hand wrapped around the blade and pulled it from my grasp. I could hear it clatter to the ground in front of me. Then I saw the bolt cutters that were knocked over. They were just out of reach, but I had an idea. I yelled, "Hey, asshole! Yeah, you with the face! Come get me!" Well, this enraged the wire walk. Don't know if it was just the noise from me talking or the words themselves that were spoken, but the wire walk doubled its effort to get me. As soon as both arms came through the rubber hydraulic hoses, I ducked down and lunged in an awesome move that I probably could not do again if my life depended on it, which in this case it did. I grabbed the bolt cutters, did a somersault and landed on my feet. I spun and dove towards the wire walk's hands. The head of the bolt cutters landed inside the creature's wrist, and I pushed down on the levers, cutting off one of the oversized hands with a sickening crunch. The demon from hell hissed and bucked as black, oily blood squirted from its missing hand. I wound up the bolt cutters like it was a baseball bat, and I needed a grand slam to win the World Series. I swung for all I was worth, making contact with the wire walk's jaw. As it separated from its body, I could hear the skin being torn. The creature fell on the ground. I raised the bolt cutters over my head and repeatedly brought it down onto its face over and over again. I stumbled my way over to the control and started to panic when the override lever was snapped. The brakes were starting to strain. I got on the radio. "Mark, the control lever is broken in half. I can't give you control." With a rush of static I heard, "Pull me up! Pull me up!" I replied, "Well, I'm trying the elevator motor. I don't think it can take the weight." I paused for a few seconds and heard a creaking sound. "Mark, the brakes are failing, dude. I'm so sorry." The sound of fishing line being unspooled grew loud as the elevator picked up speed and free fell into the bottom of the shaft, with Mark still inside. In shock, I looked around until I found my pistol. I reloaded it with my last magazine and found my pocket knife. I walked out of the elevator room using the bolt cutters as a makeshift crutch. I started to close one of the iron doors when Mario came pulling up in the armored truck. He turned the truck off to lessen our noise as he said, "Hey, where's Cherry Macaron?" I looked up at him and my face said it all. He didn't make it. We closed the heavy iron door, wrapped the chain around it, and locked it. None too soon had we finished that banging could be heard coming from the heavy iron door. Part 3. "Damn," Mario said. "I wish we had an M67 frag grenade to toss down there." He mimicked tossing one down the shaft and made an explosion sound with his mouth. I hobbled to the truck, still using the bolt cutter as a crutch. I tossed the cutters into the woods and climbed into the truck, making my way to the back. I grabbed my beloved Remington 870 and hobbled my way back to the opening. I stuck the barrel between the gap in the door as dozens of wirewalk hands reached up. I fired and fired and fired, emptying all but one shell into the opening. You could hear the 9.32 caliber balls ricochet around the shaft and hit into their soft flesh. I looked at Mario. "There's your hand grenade. 5 rounds of 00 buck." I started to reload the shotgun from the side saddle. Oh, shotguns are like pigs. You have to feed them constantly or else they're useless, I said. Mario poked his head inside the generator room and let out a whistle. "Oh, what happened here?" I replied with, "One of them got in there and tore the place up while fighting me. Snapped the control lever and tore up the hydraulic line for the brakes. Once the pressure was lost, the brakes released." A few moments later, Mario came out holding a small device with a power cord hanging off the end of it. "Yeah, this is a fuel pump. Let's drain the fuel from the generator because, Lord knows, Mark, won't need it anymore, and honestly, I don't know if we're going to make it to the closest gas station." As the small pump did its job, Mario looked around and I stood guard. He came out with a set of keys and the lever for the elevator control. "Hey, I found the keys for the lock," he said, handing them to me. "Also, this lever looks cut, not broken. Looks like a clean cut, not jagged like you'd expect. It's the same with the hydraulic line. Looks very clean cut." I sighed and said, "Follow me." We began to walk to the iron doors. "Look, Mario, these North Woods have secrets, and some secrets need to stay hidden away from everyone." Mario looked over at the bolt cutters as we walked past a chunk of rubber still stuck into the cutters and little beads of hydraulic fluid. In a smooth motion, I picked up the bolt cutters and put them up on my shoulder. I walked over to the iron doors. "Mario, I've seen men like him. He wouldn't have stopped. He would have kept going and done anything to make a quick buck." I dropped the bolt cutters down the shaft and then dropped the keys for the lock. I spun, facing Mario, my shotgun swinging up. The former Marine NCO looked scared as I yelled, "Gunny, down." He dropped to the deck, spun, and pulled his pistol out. I fired 1 round as Mario got 3 off lightning fast. The rounds hit the wirewalk as it was in mid-air. The shotgun round tore his flesh apart as the 3 pistol shots hit within a centimeter of each other, all of them headshots. I bent down to help him up. I looked at the body and looked at Mario. "Hey, buddy, what exactly was your job in the Marine Corps?" I asked. "I was a pastry chef. Just a lonely little pastry chef," he replied. We both laughed and headed back to the truck, ready to head home. 1 hour later. I was just tapping away on my phone when Mario spoke up. "Hey, what are you doing? You're not writing about what just happened, are you?" I replied with, "Yeah, is that cool?" "Sure," he responded. "Got no problem with that. It's just my, colorful vocabulary I'm worried about. I don't want people to think I'm a foul-mouthed asshole." "Oh, don't worry, Mario. I'm changing it up to make it more appropriate for the narrator to narrate. But I'm guessing most people can figure out the curse words easily. For example, I'm using the word rooster when in reality you say cock." Before I could finish my sentence, the armored truck hit a pothole and I almost got launched out of my seat despite wearing a seatbelt. Mario let out a laugh. "Okay, good," he said. "I just wanted to make sure, and I better not read anything in the comments section like, 'Oh, I love Mario. We need more of him, he's the best,' or 'Mario is the spirit animal.' If I find out that's the case, I'll come steal your dog. Oh, you don't have a dog? I'll buy one for you and wait until you have a great bond with it, and then I'll steal it from you. Also, what are you doing listening to this at night? You should be sleeping, and those curtains do not match the wall color." "Whoa, Mario," I said. "Are you breaking the fourth wall in my story? I'm sorry, people. He gets cranky when he doesn't get his Crayola crayons for a snack." Mario turned and looked at me. "Who are you talking to?" "You know what? It's been a screwed up day. Let's just focus on getting home, okay?" I replied. "You got that right," Mario agreed. "This was more screwed up than a nun doing power squats in a cucumber field." 2 weeks later, an old mint green pickup truck drove down the old dirt road with the wind whistling through the 1-inch hole in the roof of the truck. Dry bloodstains the color of rust covered the inside. The tailgate had black lettering that said Park Ranger. The truck came to a rest in the parking lot of the Silverhead mine, and 3 men shuffled out. The driver was wearing a disheveled Park Ranger uniform. The name tag read Corey W. The other 2 men wore suits. One sported a striped 3-piece suit and a fedora hat, while the other man wore a classic black suit carrying a bulky box under one arm and a small leather-bound book in the other. "I was wondering if you were ever going to come back for them. You know they've been here a long time, so what changed?" Corey questioned. The man in the striped suit spoke, his voice as smooth as a snake. "Well, some bitch burnt my house down, so I've come back for my pets. Now let's shed some light on the situation." With a snap of his left hand, all the lights on the property came to life, even though the power had been off and the generator had run out of fuel long ago. Even with the lights on, the faces of the 2 men in suits were still somehow cast in shadows. The 3 walked over to the iron doors covering the mine shaft. Hissing could be heard, and dozens of white bony hands shot out between the gaps of the doors trying to reach for its prey. And every now and then a loud bang resounded as one of the wirewalks violently threw themselves at the door. "Ah, stop it, demon. Your master commands it," the man in the striped suit said, while the man in the black suit stood off to his left and Corey to his right. The hands retracted and the thrashing and hissing stopped. The striped-suited man bent down to examine the lock and chain. Fire began to form in his right hand until he fully enveloped his palm with the flame. With a loud whoosh, he clamped his hand around the fire. Sizzling skin like fajitas on a hot plate could be heard. Then he opened his right hand. An obsidian key had formed. And the man said, "Now, if I let you out, are you going to play nice?" Silence filled the air, and then in a booming voice the man said, "Speak, demon." A faint "yes" could be heard hissing from between the doors. Before he opened the lock, the man turned to his left and said, "Doctor, any reservations about this?" The man in the black suit stepped forward, revealing a skull-face mask that covered his face from the cheeks to his hairline, but left his mouth and nose exposed. Under his left arm was the charred remains of an old tape recorder. The other hand held a book titled Beyond the Twilight World. The doctor spoke with a smooth British accent. "Well, Lucy, looks like we've got ourselves a story." Lucy put the key into the lock. The lock and chain itself started to glow bright red and melt away. With the flick of his hand, the iron door slid open effortlessly. To his right, Corey's eyes began to glow purple as he started to transform. Lucy took off his fedora to reveal a set of small horns, and the doctor stood there with an absolutely wicked smile as one by one the wirewalk started to crawl out of the silver-haired mine. Well, my dear friends, that is one that I started a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, and I never got around to do the concluding part, and I've finally done it. And of course, there's a bit of a meta knowledge or whatever going on there, referring to me. Oh, very sweet, very sweet. Love that. Yeah, so thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say about this story? Nearly 3 hours long now, and it was a really hell of a ride. It really was. So I really hope you enjoyed that one. A lot of fun. Well, it's your Friday evening's entertainment. I'll be back again here on Sunday with something else long, something else I've been meaning to sort of get around to finishing for ages. Until then, really hope you enjoy your weekend. And of course, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.